Release that witch eye by Ermu. Chapter 541, The Mists of Bloodfang Association. 2 days later, Roland met Iffy in his office again. Her complexion was much better now. In her eyes, they seemed to have more complex emotions, which made her look more fresh and alive, more human. Heidi Morgan wants to see you, but she's not able to come over, so she asked Tilly Wimbledon to send us here. Iffy bowed to Roland, and her opening remarks surprised Roland slightly. Lady Heidi doesn't like Her Highness, Tilly. She believes that combat witches are the real core of Sleeping Island, so the Bloodfang Association shouldn't just be treated as an ordinary witch organization. She wants to make a breakthrough with your help, and she promises to offer more than what Tilly offers. Of course. I know Your Highness doesn't need them. Tell me the details of the Bloodfang Association, said Roland with a hand propping up his chin. Yes. Her storytelling lasted about an hour, while Roland was frowning more and more. In the end, Roland could not help but ask, does Tilly know about all of this? I don't know. Iffy shook her head. Lady Heidi forbids us from revealing the past of the Bloodfang Association, and seldom talks with Her Highness. How about the other witch organizations in Sleeping Island? They're closer to the witches from the Kingdom of Grey Castle, especially after the building of the sleeping spell. Although some combat witches agree with Lady Heidi secretly, most of them don't want to confront Ashes. It turns out the pressure on Tilly's shoulders is not much lesser than mine. Roland felt impressed. Different from the situation that I'm the perfectly justified ruler of the Western region, Witches of Sleeping Island are more like a loose organization based on covenants. Although Tilly is the organizer, she actually doesn't have the authority over those small groups who came to join her. Especially because of this, it showed Tilly's merits were superior to others, uniting most of the assistant witches, and positively establishing connections with the secular rulers of other islands. In particular, the invention of the sleeping spell gave her a chance to manage all the other witches. After all, assistant witches are equally important should not be just a slogan. The Witches' Bounty Guild just offered those assistant witches with various odd abilities an excellent stage to present themselves. When they completed missions and obtained a large amount of remuneration, they could then use it to improve the quality of their lives on Sleeping Island. Such a mindset would be formed gradually. After all, no powerful combat witch would like to spend her days chewing salted fish. Especially when the assistant witches had their status promoted, they would naturally favor Tilly. When the time came, as the leader of the guild, Tilly would undoubtedly gain a great power of speech. This was probably why Heidi Morgan could not wait any longer. In addition, the Bloodfang Association was full of doubtful points. As the daughter of Archduke Morgan, how could Heidi not be able to afford a group of non-combat witches? It was only fair to say that she did not intend to take those useless people in from the very beginning. Different from the fact that witches from the Witch Cooperation Association wanted to be united to help each other, all that she wanted was a team which could fight for her benefits. Plus her obsession towards the kingdom of Wolfheart, all of these made Roland vigilant against her. He should probably write a secret letter to Tilly, telling her to carefully watch out the moves of the Bloodfang Association. Didn't Heidi forbid you from revealing the secrets of the Bloodfang Association? He lightly knocked on the desk. Don't you want to follow her instructions anymore? Iffy bit on her lips. I want to join the Witch Union. Roland stopped knocking and looked at her in surprise. Although he knew that the exhibition of the powers of the thermal weapons would greatly strike the powerful and arrogant combat witches, he did not expect the effect would be so extraordinary. But you hurt Maggie. He contemplated for a while. Right now I can't. About that, you can punish me as you wish. Iffy unbuttoned her robe. Almost at the same time, a pair of hands covered Roland's eyes from behind. But Nightingale seemed to have forgotten that she was in the mist and that her transparent fingers could not block Roland's vision. Iffy lowered her robe and turned her back to Roland. Roland could not help but gasp. He could see, on Iffy's back there were all sorts of whip scars. The restored wounds looked like numerous earthworms lying crisscross on her back, forming a sharp contrast with the surrounding delicate skin. As the wounds had been healed, even Nana could not do anything to them with her healing ability. those scars remained as they were. When Iffy talked about the rigorous fighting trainings in the Bloodfang Association, she only used very brief words. Now when Roland thought back, he could vaguely smell the bloody atmosphere in her words. "Put on your clothes," he said with a low voice. "But, Your Majesty." Nightingale had shown herself and pulled up Iffy's robe to the shoulders. "If you want to join the Witch Union, then don't bring the Bloodfang Association's ways of handling things here." Roland suddenly felt a suppression in his chest. "You can apply to Wendy. As to whether the other witches would accept you, it'll depend on your performance." He paused. "Anyway, City of Neverwinter is the home to witches. Even if you don't join the union, you can settle down here." Upon hearing this, Iffy's shoulders loosened. "Thank you, for your kindness." After watching her leave, Roland stood up, walked to the French window, and let out a deep breath. Till now, his team for arresting demons was fully assembled and yet he could not feel relaxed. "Actually, she's very lucky," Nightingale walked to him and said. "Can that be called lucky? Compared with her friend Annie, at least she survived." If the Bloodfang Association is really the only witch organization survived in the Kingdom of Wolfheart, then its members will end tragically in case they get caught by the church or the noble. That's also why the member witches yearned so much for the Holy Mountain. A doubt suddenly emerged in Roland's heart. Were those non-combat witches really sent to other witch organizations by Heidi Morgan? To avoid the exposure of their whereabouts, the witches seldom contacted one another, and their gathering places changed frequently. How did Heidi gather such information? After all, the foothold of an organization is a matter of life and death. If not to particularly trusted persons, the organization leader probably won't tell other people of their gathering sites easily. Even if Heidi knew all that, sending the witches to other organizations was highly risky of an exposure. Would the other organizations willingly accept whatever she threw at them? The more he thought about it, the more he found it weird. But Nightingale confirmed that Iffy was not lying. Obviously, the problem lay within the founders of the Bloodfang Association. In conclusion, Heidi seemed more dangerous now. Roland realized that he should convey the information to Tilly as soon as possible so that she could carry out an investigation and make some early preparations. The daughter of Archduke Morgan was most likely not royal to witches. Chapter 542, The Wicked Journey. "Sister, we've arrived." Colcant happily rushed into the cabin. "I've told you twice during this trip to not call me sister." Edith raised her head and took a glance at him. "Have you forgotten?" "No," Cole shivered. "No, I still remember." "Then who am I?" My clerk, Miss Edith." "Who are you then?" "Father." "No, the ambassador sent out by Calvin Kant, the Duke of the Northern Region." "Great. Make sure that you don't make the same mistake for the third time." Edith stood up, stretched her stiff limbs, and walked out of the cabin. "Call all the members of the emissary delegation. Let's go to the inner city." This was a little trick Edith liked to play. She liked to secretly observe the person she was about to negotiate with and then only revealed herself after having a rough understanding of what kind of person the other party was. In doing so, she could take precautions beforehand and impress the other. If the one she negotiated with was male, he would most likely be interested in her. She never tried to hide her gender, on the contrary, she used it as a social advantage. Since she was called the Pearl of the Northern Region, she certainly needed to make good use of it. "How about the heads then? Leave them on the boat, unless you want to hold them in your bedroom." She twitched her mouth. "They have gone rotten." Walking off the trestle, Edith noticed that there were many boats on the canal. Many people were at the dock, most of whom carried big luggage. Judging from their clothing, they looked neither like slaves, nor businessmen. She was quite curious about it because as far as she knew, people in the other walks of life seldom traveled at the spring plowing season. She sent for a servant. "Go ask them where they're going." "What does it have to do with us?" Cole asked in bewilderment. Since Roland Wimbledon has taken over this city, he must have issued some new policies to declare his authority. What he said can, in a way, reflect his characteristics. So, it certainly has something to do with us. Edith smiled. Of course you can pay a few gold royals for the rats to gather the information, but I personally prefer first-hand information. Is that so? You need to observe more, think more, my dear ambassador. She said, this is a rare opportunity. On the other side of the city gate, the streets were filled with more pedestrians. There were booths on both sides of the road. He could hear constant cries from vendors. A few years ago, Edith had been to the King's City to participate in the 5th Princess Adulthood ceremony with her father. This city had not changed much. It was still as busy as it used to be. If it were in the city of Evernight, one could have never seen such a crowd except for a holiday or a celebration. All of a sudden, a speaker on the street caught her attention. Hold on for a while. Edith ordered the troupe to stop and joined the crowd with Cole. Can you saw wood? Can you lay bricks? Can you take care of cattle and sheep? As long as you specialize in something, you're the talents His Majesty is looking for. Go to Western Region. There, His Majesty is building a new King's City, City of Neverwinter. Your talent will bring you a huge reward. Talent? Edith pondered on it for a while. What an interesting name. However, what does it mean by a new King's City? The City of Neverwinter? Is there such a city in Western Region? Pacing forward a little bit, she saw another group of people. Witches are innocent. This is the repentance the high priest wrote down right before his execution, another speaker said, waving the document in his hand. They may be your close relatives, your daughter, your sister. If you're still afraid of them, send them to the City of Neverwinter. They'll be well taken care of. If you hate to part with them, you can go with them. His Majesty has promised, the witches' families will get an accommodation to protect from wind and rain. Plus, you'll also get a decent job. Has the high priest been executed? Cole said with his eyes wide open. On the other hand, Edith frowned. If this is Roland Wimbledon's new policy, the way he promotes it's quite melodramatic. Isn't he afraid to provoke the church to a full revenge? That'll be nothing like the fight among nobles, but a deadly war against the heresies. No idea whether it's a blessing or a curse to serve such a king. It took her an hour to walk through the street leading to the inner city. She found actually the street was full of such speakers who basically repeatedly told whatever His Majesty had done after conquering the King's City. Anyone who came to the King's City only needed to listen on the street for half a day to understand the changes His Majesty had made, without the need to get any help from the rats. My lady, I found it out. The servant who was sent to inquire about the news caught up with the team, panting. They're all going. City of Neverwinter, right? Edith interrupted him. You knew it? Don't bother finding a hotel now. We're going to the palace to submit the emissary document. Her heart was filled with a vague sense of foreboding. Now, hurry. What? Cole asked in surprise. His Majesty left the King's City a week ago? Without even holding an inauguration ceremony? That's what the receptionist said, the attendant reported. At first His Majesty left a man named Bear of Mons, his chief minister, behind to take care of daily affairs, but Bear of Mons left the King's City yesterday too. Apart from the servants, there's nobody else in the palace. The receptionist said if you want to talk with the city hall, he can pass the message for you. That's fine, Edith said in a cold voice. She did not expect her hunch was right. She had been traveling non-stop all the way, yet still was too late to catch up with Roland. Roland was really planning to move the capital, leave this splendid city behind, and rebuild a new capital city in Western Region. What's exactly in his head? To build a city on such a scale as the King's City would take at least 30 to 40 years. What should we do? Looking at the stunned members of the emissary delegation, Cole asked quietly. After a long while, she said sullenly, turn around. Head for the City of Neverwinter. They've left anyway. No need to hurry, Cole said with a bitter face. It's been a week since I took a shower last time. I feel lice are about to grow on my body. Edith turned her head and found her collar also smelled weird. Finally, she sighed. Let's find a hotel for the night. We'll set off tomorrow morning. In the next morning, when the emissary delegation arrived at the dock, they found their boat had been burned to a skeleton. What happened? For the first time Edith felt confused. Ahem, don't be mad, sis Miss Edith. Observe more, think more. Cole waved his hand and stopped a passerby. The dock will catch fire as well? Ah, you mean that. The passerby enthusiastically explained, no idea who sneakily hid bodies on their boat. The rats who tried to steal something from the boat smelled it. You know, people are very cautious about such stuff. After all, half a year ago a demonic plague struck the city, which was exactly caused by the bodies distributed by the church. Anyway, to deal with them, burning is the safest way. The captain has been arrested by the guards for interrogation. Oh, do you know him? Edith was startled, not knowing what face she should put on. After a long silence, she uttered, I don't know him. Thanks. It seems we need to find a new boat. She thought. I guess this trip of loyalty won't go as smoothly as I imagined. Chapter 543, The Turning Point. Barav was like a different person when Roland met him again. He looked vigorous and radiant, and even his chest had risen considerably. His footsteps were powerful and conveyed a strong sense of confidence. He was not how a 50-year-old minister typically looked. It seemed that the days he spent in the King's City was highly satisfactory. If I had known it, I would have called you back a little later. Roland joked. No, Your Majesty. Regardless of how prosperous the City of Dawn is, it can't compare with the City of Neverwinter personally created by you. Barav responded while smoothing his mustache. Wherever I am, my heart will always be with you. Why do these words sound so weird and awkward? Roland coughed twice and attempted to change the subject. How's the situation over there? Don't worry. With my students and the First Army around, the new assigned nobles aren't able to create trouble even if they intend to, the director replied smugly. I've deliberately given them more space to fight for money and power among themselves. As long as they don't disrupt the normal livelihoods of the citizens, that is acceptable. I believe that, for a long period of time henceforth, they'll scheme and scramble among themselves to attain the tiniest amount of power. After all, they've had absolutely no qualification to enter the city hall thus far. It's indeed a good idea. Roland commented and laughed. Although he knew a thing or two about political balancing and other control strategies, he was obviously not as good at actualizing them as these old foxes who had been involved in politics for a long time. While they might not be the wiliest of foxes, they were definitely thick-skinned and vicious enough. It could be said that it was only now that Barav revealed the true extent of his talents. As the king, Roland could stay out of dabbling in dirty political tricks himself. As long as he had the personnel, law and military power in his grip, nobody would dare to covet his authority. Your Majesty, may I ask where have you sent Treasurer Lauren Moore? Barav revealed a little displeasure as he sighed. The ceremonial officer told me that you didn't execute him. He siphoned off some of the relief rations distributed to the people, colluded with the former prime minister, and was involved in the exploitation of refugees. Roland shrugged. His crimes didn't warrant execution, and while at his age, he wasn't suitable to be sent to the mines. The only thing I could do was to deport him. That's a real pity. Why, you need him for something? Of course not. Lauren was rather influential in the King's City. I was just afraid that the lower nobles wouldn't be able to handle him. Barav laughed and shook his head. As my mentor, he bullied me for a long time. I regret that I didn't have the opportunity to see him begging for mercy. Roland joined the laughter. I believe that he could bring his whole family to the Kingdom of Dawn. Who knows, you may get to see him again one day. Let's not talk about this. I called you back because I intend to build a few factories. They're related to the upcoming series of major reforms in the city of Neverwinter. Do you need a lot of people? Yes indeed, otherwise I'd only have to call Carl. Roland nodded. I'll need at least 3,000 people. Bear forced a smile. Your Majesty, that's a huge demand worthy of you. In other cities, there's no chance that a project would require 3,000 people at the same time. The good news is, not every one of these 3,000 people needs to be literate. I'll only require more than 200 of them to have completed primary education. What do you want to build? Roland placed the records which were prepared long ago in front of the director. A coke plant, a steel plant, and a forge. Is the steel produced by Miss Anna not enough? Berev asked. The problem is that it's too inefficient. Roland sighed. Her magic power should be used for more sophisticated manufacturing, rather than wasted on preparing the materials for steam engines. I hope that I can de-witch the basic industrial productions this year. At present, the industries of Neverwinter had reached a turning point. If a breakthrough was not found, it would be hard to progress. This was because the source power machines heavily depended on Anna's materials, and therefore the scale of production could not be expanded. In fact, the steam engines could be produced without using such a high grade of steel. The first generation of steam engines was made out of iron only. Now, the preconditions for a breakthrough had been fully satisfied. The coal mine was able to handle all of the coking processes. Coke was one of the primary ingredients of large-scale steelmaking. The dozen or so earth blast furnaces in the furnace area also supplied an abundant amount of iron ingots. Steel could be smelted using a simple converter, while the steam hammers in the forge could be used to create components that the other factories could directly process. If these procedures could be made into a cycle, Anna would be completely liberated from her duties, and only normal people would be needed throughout the production process. After Roland outlined the important tasks of the three projects, Berev quickly understood the meaning of de-witch. I understand, Your Majesty. However, are these things really possible? He appeared unconvinced. Can we really obtain enough steel without relying on the demons, witches' powers? You may not have known that in other cities, it's common for a piece of forged steel to cost 20 times the price of a piece of pig iron. In this era, steel was forged by the blacksmith's hammer. The repeated hammering of the iron ingots caused excess carbon and other impurities to be oxidized until steel was formed. Of course, the efficiency of this process was unspeakably low, and a lot of raw materials would be wasted. A significant amount of iron would break off due to oxidation, and therefore several pieces of iron ingot were necessary to produce a usable piece of steel. This explained why a full set of body armor that was completely made of steel was the lifelong desire of many knights. It could even be passed down from generation to generation as a family treasure. From a certain perspective, the laborious method of producing steel could give one the false perception that the effort put into it made it more exquisite and higher grade. Now that City of Neverwinter could mass-produce steel, believed by most people to be the witch's work, Berev's suspicions were not hard to understand. However, to Roland, steel was just iron with a different proportion of carbon. I won't say it's easy. Both coking and converter steelmaking require techniques that were discovered by trial and error. However, Roland paused briefly. These projects are definitely achievable. When they're completed, there'll be hundreds of chimneys in the industrial area. The monthly output of steel will exceed the current annual output. We'll then have an endless supply of steel to produce bicycles, ships, all kinds of machines, and even houses. Everything that you see will be made of steel. It'll be in everyone's homes, and even the common folk will be able to use steel utensils and tools. Berev remained speechless for a long time before he finally replied, I'll draw up a recruitment plan and financial allocation plan for you to review as quickly as possible. Okay, you'll be in charge of the preparatory work for this, Roland said in encouragement. As Berev walked toward the office door, he abruptly turned back and bowed down at Roland. It'll be my pleasure and honor to see a world like that, Your Majesty. Chapter 544, A New Source of Power. The prospect of a new world, huh? Roland could not help laughing. He then asked Nightingale to summon Anna in. At these times, Nightingale would leave voluntarily to give the two of them privacy. Anna was wearing a light blue one-piece dress, underneath which her knee-length black stockings were visible, and her feet were covered in a pair of moccasins. All these made her appear particularly lively. These modern-styled items of clothing were tailored under the guidance of Roland during his spare time using flow-coated fabrics that were provided by Soraya. They were extremely light, easy to wear, and highly durable. They were thus perfectly suitable for Anna to wear when she was crafting apparatus. Whenever Roland looked into her sparkling eyes, he would feel a surge of happiness and smile uncontrollably. Of course, he no longer needed to act as mannerly as he used to. He wrapped his arms around her and sat her on his lap. Then he took a sniff of her hair and kissed her cheek before getting to the point. "I want to develop a new source of energy. Will it be something like the steam engine?" She turned her head back to face him. Her collarbone could be seen protruding along her fair neck. Roland could not resist reaching his hand out to stroke her collarbone. It tickled her such that she began to laugh shyly. "Your Majesty, be proper." "Hee, all right." He placed Anna on the seat and stood up to extract a stack of blueprints from the files on one side of the table. "Have a look at this first. How much can you understand it?" Whenever Anna was studying something, her expression would turn completely solemn. Roland would often feel an unexplainable sense of shame and inferiority when he observed her looking aloof. It felt to him as though he was sitting in a naturally well-lit classroom and peeking at the smartest student in the class. In order to counteract this feeling, he thought of the naughty things he would do to her at night. "I've more or less understood everything." After Anna looked through the last of the blueprints, she thought for a moment and nodded. "It's also powered by steam, except that the piston is replaced by windmill blades, and therefore saves energy on the reciprocating motion of the connecting rods. Am I right?" "You're absolutely right." Roland discarded his wild thoughts and put on a serious face. "It's called the steam turbine. While it's also powered by high-pressure steam, its efficiency is much higher than the steam engine." This was the revolutionary product which Roland had conceived for a long time. It could be said that Anna was the main reason why he wanted to rid the basic industries of dependence on witches. Only this way would she be able to focus on high-end mechanical production. The steam turbine was his experiment within this field. Turbines had many uses. They could be used to power ships and provide electricity, especially the latter. It could be foreseen that after Fallen Dragon Ridge was captured, Countess Spear would have to spend a long time sorting out government affairs. It would not be wise to rely solely on Mystery Moon's magic power to provide night lighting for the industry area, not to mention the residential area's electricity supply. Roland certainly did not want to admit that this was a planning failure caused by his lack of experience. In order to make up this mistake, he had to think of an alternative means of producing electricity. Due to the natural flaws of the circulation principle, the electricity generated by steam engines was inconsistent. Furthermore, Roland had weak knowledge of voltage regulation. It was thus a more suitable choice to use steam turbines, which had more stable output power and higher thermal efficiency. "What do I have to do first?" Anna asked. "Remember what you did for the gunboat?" Roland showed her a blueprint of a blade. "You'll need to build an operable model of this. It only needs to be about 1 meter in length. The main problem you have to solve is the angle of the blade. It has to allow high-pressure steam to flow smoothly through every stator grill. If you can do this, more than half of the work would be done. Yet, how could a usable end product be built without detailed data? The only way was repeated trial and error. As for the core of the turbine, Roland was not worried about the difficulty of altering the impeller because the cutting precision of black fire was much higher than any modern machining tool. He also did not worry about the strength of the materials. After all, impellers usually operated at a temperature of 500 to 600 degrees Celsius, and the alloy steel discovered by Lucia was more than competent for this task. The key problem was the angular coordination between the stator cascade and the impeller. The former was like a fixed barrier that could alter the angular direction of the passage of steam so as to prevent the steam from impacting with the impeller all at the same time. It also prevented directional disorder and the production of opposite forces. In essence, it was like a comb for airflow disorder. If the model that Anna built was operable, Roland would mass-produce it, and then there would be no more difficulties. After the processing methods and the quality of materials were improved, the industrial results would be inevitably substantial. I understand. Anna's eyes gleamed, as though signaling that she was ready to begin work. No hurry. Roland held her hand tightly. You should have heard from Wendy that I've decided to launch an attack to capture the demons. Yes, Anna replied, will you be going along? Roland shook his head calmly. That's good. Anna rested her head on his shoulder. The last time, I was almost frightened to death when I saw you injured. Really? But I've heard from Nightingale that you were the calmest person around. If it wasn't for your decisive plan, I might truly have. Before he could finish his sentence, Anna covered his mouth with her soft hand. Don't say that word. She only loosened her hand after Roland nodded in acknowledgement. He then continued, anyway, what I want to say is that you have to take good care of yourself, understand? If anything happens, use the sigil of gods will immediately without hesitation. It's okay even if you don't capture the demons. I'll be waiting at the castle for your triumphant return. Don't worry. Anna laughed. I won't let them hurt the other witches either. After Anna left, Roland stayed silent for a long time before he murmured, Are you around? Of course. Nightingale's figure appeared on top of the study table. But I didn't eavesdrop on what the two of you said. I only returned after she left. Roland stood up and walked over to the window. While looking towards the direction of the snow mountains, he explained to Nightingale the hunting plan that he had conceived. Before setting out, you all will have to rehearse a few times to familiarize with the entire hunting procedure, as well as understand your own and one another's tasks. Moreover, this plan is only effective if you're facing a small number of demons. It'll have to be adjusted based on the situation. He paused briefly before continuing. If you ever run into the worst kind of situation, and I mean the most hopeless and irredeemable situation, you must bring Anna back no matter what. Nightingale did not say anything. Instead, she waited until Roland turned his head back to look at her, before replying with a disconcerting look on her face. Is this the real reason why you aren't going? Roland could not deny the truth. If not, you'd definitely choose to save me, right? Understood. Nightingale sighed lightly. I'll do my best. It's all on you. Roland patted her shoulders and enunciated. Chapter 545, Battle Rehearsal. City of Neverwinter, north of the border city wall. Upon reaching the former test site, Iffy found that many witches were already gathered there. Among them were Maggie and her perpetual companion, a golden-haired young girl. She seems to be called Lightning. Iffy thought. When the young girl saw Iffy, she viciously shook her fist and grimaced, before tugging Maggie to a far distance away. If it were 3 days ago, Iffy would have made it a point to lecture the two of them that they have to maintain respect in front of a combat witch. But this time, she simply laughed silently. The young girl's alert expression reminded Iffy of Annie. When I was at that age, Annie was just like that girl. She was always careful and vigilant, and always walked in front to protect me. It's clearly only by chance that the two of us sought refuge together. Perhaps, this is what the Union calls sisters. Since everyone's here, I'll begin to explain the mission. It's codenamed Melting Point and Miss Agatha will be the commander. Roland proclaimed before he walked into the middle of the audience. Of course, many of you already know the details of the mission. However, for the sake of the newcomers, I'll explain everything all over again. Do the newcomers refer to me? Iffy immediately gathered her focus. No matter what, this is the first mission assigned by the new lord. Since he has asked me to take part, it means that there's some battle involved. This will be a good opportunity to demonstrate the value of my abilities. Iffy thought. In order to understand the enemy's strength and hasten the research of the sigil of magic stones, you all will be heading to Devil's Town behind the snow mountains. You'll draw the demons out to fight, and use ambush to capture them alive. After Roland finished his explanation, Iffy was unable to collect her wits for a long time. Surely there's nothing wrong with my ears. Jesus, is he serious? Were these demons really responsible for destroying the witches' empire that ruled over the entire mainland? This blue-haired woman, who serves as the commander of this mission, is a senior witch from over 400 years ago? The battle of divine will shall decide the fate of mankind? These nasty enemies are hiding somewhere not far from the western region? How is any of this possible? She maintained a stiff face as she glanced over at the other witches. However, she realized that there was not a hint of surprise on any of their faces. It was apparent that all of them knew of these things beforehand. Now, Agatha will talk about the things you'll need to pay attention to during the mission, as well as brief you on the tactical arrangement. Agatha nodded and stepped forth. According to our intelligence, there's a vigilant eye demon in the demons' camp. This is crucial to our plan to lure the demons out. Anyone who sees it will be seen back by it. If our position is adjudged to be far away, the first group of enemies to be expected will be the flying devil beasts. There aren't many of these demons, particularly in such a remote place. The last time we went, there were only 2. I don't expect the number to have changed. We are disadvantaged in aerial combat, and therefore the best plan is to draw them towards the ground. If so, I'll be able to handle both of them myself. However, the mad demons which they may carry on their backs will be left to Miss Iffy to handle. Agatha glanced at the latter. If you manage to capture them, our mission will be considered a success. She seems to be only slightly older than me, but yet it's said that she has lived for over 400 years? Iffy remained in a daze for a while before mumbling incoherently, I understand. You've never seen demons before, and so it's normal to be doubtful. Agatha seemed to have read her thoughts. Wendy has records of the association's encounters with demons. After the rehearsal, you may go and have a look. This will save you from being completely stunned when you see them in reality. These words made Iffy frown involuntarily. Completely stunned? Even if the enemies come straight from hell, they'll soon be crying piteously in the cage I set for them. How do we pull them towards the ground? Lightning asked. Abandon the hot air balloon and enter the misty forest. Agatha crouched on the ground and used stones to create a visual diagram. When Sylvie notices the enemies chasing, you and Maggie will immediately escort those on the balloon into the forest. I've confirmed this with His Majesty. If it's a hydrogen balloon, Wendy will be able to operate it alone. Together with Sylvie making eye contact with the eye demon, the 2 of them will be able to escape at the same time. As the devil beasts approach the balloon, you'll then be responsible to lure them into the forest. Because their lines of vision will be obstructed, they'll descend to the ground and hunt. Be careful of the enemy's spears. I trust that you'll be able to evade them easily. Ooh, this plan sounds exciting. Lightning exclaimed with a wide grin on her face. Count on me. The forest is Leaf's natural home ground. Once the demons enter the ambush area, they'll be trapped. I don't have to tell you what to do next. What if there are more than 2 devil beasts? A witch with jade green hair asked. If there are several of them, the demons will probably split up and hunt. What you can do is to keep a few more people in the balloon to conduct aerial surveillance, while the rest enter the forest. Agatha paused for a moment. If that's the case, Anna will handle any enemies in the air. But remember, the lethal range of the Sigil of Gods is limited. It's best to activate the sigil only when the devil beasts gather together. Furthermore, Anna won't be able to use her own abilities while activating the sigil. During that time, Leaf, you must make sure to protect Anna. How about me? Nightingale questioned. You'll accompany Iffy. Her ability is only effective within a range of 10 steps, and therefore she's vulnerable to the demon's spears when in an exposed position. You'll use your mist to shorten the distance with the enemies quickly. Okay, Nightingale turned her head and took a good look at Iffy. The latter immediately felt the aura of the former's magical power. It was sharp and cold, as though it was a substance of its own. Don't you be a burden. Iffy could sense that the former was also a combat witch. Not only that the former had experienced many bloody battles and had a lot of blood on her hands. All right, everyone shall begin the rehearsal. Agatha clapped her hands in encouragement. We'll start with luring the demons out. An hour into the rehearsal, Iffy already had a general understanding of the abilities of every witch participating in the mission. She was surprised that there were many witches here who could be considered combat witches. Take Leaf for example. She hid her in a tree trunk in the forest. She could manipulate the entire forest to do her bidding. This type of ability was almost inconceivable and was on a level that completely transcended the usual limits of a witch. Or Wendy, who although was only in charge of controlling the balloon, could summon a small hurricane that turned stones and dirt into painful bolts. Agatha's frost could serve both as a shield and a sharp blade. She was therefore equally proficient in offense and defense, at least when at close range. Nightingale was even more terrifying. Once she entered her mist, she could travel to almost any part of the world she wanted. The physical obstructions of the real world did not affect her at all. Having experienced the power of this ability, Iffy could imagine that in a real battle, it made its user invincible. By moving without trace and being impossible to guard against, Nightingale would make all enemies despair quickly. Yet, the most curious talent of all was Anna. According to the mission plan, this young woman who looked like she was barely out of her adolescence was the real ace in the team. How powerful does her ability have to be to vanquish all of the demons in one go? Iffy did not have to wait long to know the answer. Chapter 546, The Mystery of God's Stones. Anna's task was completely separated from everyone else's. She only began to practice using the Sigil of Gods well after everyone else was completely familiar with the entire hunting process. Although Iffy could not comprehend what kind of ability the Sigil of Gods possessed, she could observe that the witches were all extremely excited about the rehearsal that was about to happen. Did they rarely get a chance to see Anna display her ability? Iffy's curiosity grew. She watched as Anna strolled towards the middle of the field carrying an odd-looking sheet of metal in her hands. Anna did not look like a combat witch at all. Her calm expression resembled the crystal-clear water of a lake. From her movements and gestures, it was evident that she had never been in a life-and-death battle before. The sheet of metal she was carrying also puzzled Iffy greatly. It was only about the size of a palm and was perfectly flat on both sides. Glittering gemstones were embedded on it. In no way did it look like a weapon. Let the balloons fly. Agatha gestured towards the direction of the misty forest. After a short while, several colorful balloons emerged from the forest canopy and flew up high into the sky. Go. Shoot them down. She shouted. Wait, this is probably too far. Iffy mused. The distance from the field to the edge of the forest is at least 250 meters. How would Anna be able to shoot these things down without flying? Unless, she's also able to transcend the usual limits of ability, and deliver the effects of her magic power to the sky? Anna nodded at Agatha. She raised the sheet of metal and pointed it in the direction of the balloons. Shortly, Iffy witnessed a scene that she could hardly believe. The 4 gemstones emitted a dazzling light at the same time. In a split second, the sheet of metal turned to golden color. Thunderous claps were heard from the clear sky, while rays of light weaved together in the clouds and spattered. It was as if a new sun was being formed in the heavens. Her ability can actually manipulate the entire sky. Before the crowd could even exclaim in astonishment, a blinding beam of gold light burst out of Anna's hands directly toward the balloons. The light rays in the sky were also controlled, and immediately, numerous thunderbolts could be seen following along the trail of the golden light and violently sweeping through the locations of the targets. It all seemed like a punishment that only God could have ordained. To Iffy, it was as though the deafening roars came from right beside her ears, causing her brain to buzz for a long time. By the time the light rays disappeared, she had yet to recover fully. What kind of amazing ability is this? Iffy's body continued to quiver uncontrollably as she stared at the empty sky above the forest. Even if all of the combat witches of the Bloodfang Association gathered together, they would not be able to handle such a force. Did she rely on her own abilities or that sheet of metal to be able to do this? In the face of a show of strength like this, It would not make a difference if the enemies were the wild beasts which Heidi Morgan mentioned or just a flock of sheep. Iffy suddenly remembered His Majesty Roland's suggestion. Is this the power of the senior witches? It turned out that it was also the first time that Roland witnessed a complete demonstration of the power of the sigil of God's will. The initial light rays seemed to leave an invisible trail behind them, allowing the golden thunderbolts that followed behind to take the same path. Furthermore, the location of the first thunderbolt strike was situated at the edge of the forest. This probably meant that the user of the sigil was able to control it such that it only split apart when near to the enemies. Another thing that Roland observed about the light rays was that they were only about as thick as an arm when released, but they quickly expanded in the shape of a fan, and the eventual range of each ray was approximately 50 meters. During the age of cold weapons, this was undoubtedly considered an apocalyptic weapon of mass destruction. Are all of those light rays created by magic power? Roland looked at Nightingale. I guess, probably, yes. The latter hesitated for a bit before answering. Probably? In the mist, I could indeed see the frenzied surge of magic power, but, she revealed a puzzled look on her face. Its color is different from any magic power that I know or have seen before. What color is it? Black, or should I say, the color of no light. Nightingale frowned. They looked like black holes formed by the god's stone of retaliation. Roland shuddered. How is it possible that the color of the magic power of the gold-glittering sigil is black in the misty world? Does this mean that the characteristics of their magic power are the same or at least similar? In his brief trance, Roland seemed to think of something. There's a relationship between the god stones and magic stones. It seemed as if he was on the verge of an audacious theory. After he returned to his office in the castle, he summoned Agatha in. How many times did your people research on the sigil of God's will? Not many. I've already told you everything that we found out. After all, only our chiefs were able to activate this type of sigil. Because their magic powers were crucial to our battles, there wasn't much that could be spared for this kind of experiment. She then asked curiously, what's the matter? Is something wrong? You mentioned before that the sigil was able to penetrate the defenses of the god's stone of retaliation, right? Agatha nodded. Not all the time. It depends on the quality of the god stones. Have you never observed the characteristics of the sigil of God's will's magic power? Roland asked softly. In the mist, the magical thunderbolts invoked by the sigil are the same color as the god's stone. No, we've certainly done this experiment before. It was necessary that we recorded the characteristics of the magic power. However, during the activation of the sigil, the stone of measuring would lose its monitoring function. And because our chiefs could certainly not visit the Quest Society every day, we simply recorded the observed color as gold. Agatha blinked a few times. Wait, are you saying that it has the same color as the interference area of the god stone? Indeed, Roland replied unhurriedly. I have a theory that the god stone of retaliation does not create black holes that neutralize magic power, but instead, it contains a great amount of magic power such that it affects and nullifies the operation of magic in its vicinity. This is also why the sigil of gods will causes the stone of measuring to lose its effectiveness. It creates a similar interference area as the god stone of retaliation within its range of influence, and therefore the stone of measuring did not have any effect. But the trainee who's responsible for observing magic power has explicitly said that. Agatha suddenly paused halfway through her sentence. Her observation was obstructed by the dazzling light emitted by the sigil, like shadows being covered by light. Roland quickly opined. Whereas in Nightingale's misty world, only magic power possesses color. She can even stare directly at the sun without being affected. This is why you weren't able to make this discovery. Observing magic power was a derivative skill of the witches. It was limited by the witch's individual visual level. Furthermore, observations done in the day and night would yield different conclusions. Sylvie could fully prove this point. With her eye of magic, she could discover magic activity performed several kilometers away. Her detection range was far superior to Nightingale's. This was why the Quest Society heavily trusted the results tested by the Stone of Measuring. Its accuracy was independent of the person operating it and the environment it was operated in, and thus it provided an overall highly accurate assessment of the magic power involved. It was almost as good as being able to observe under Nightingale's mist. Therefore, the Quest Society would only accept the conclusion of the observer when the Stone of Measuring was unable to operate. Chapter 547, Operation Melting Point. Agatha exasperatingly paced to and fro in front of the mahogany table. So, according to you, the Sigil of Gods can penetrate the God Stone of Retaliation because of its stronger magic power? The reason the Chaos Beasts modified the God Stone was actually to reduce its magic power and thereby turn it into a specific type of magic stone? That's what I think. No, that isn't right, she paused abruptly. If the Dark Hollow results from immense magic power, why does nothing happen to the witch? The witch? Roland was stunned. I mean Anna. Agatha pondered and said, her magic power is strong enough to activate the Sigil of Gods twice. She is even more powerful than the God Stone of Retaliation. Her black fire, however, will still be affected by the God Stone, and she cannot neutralize the magic power in her vicinity. It doesn't make sense based on your theory. Well, Roland was silent for a moment. A reasonable explanation to Agatha's question escaped him. A God Stone of Retaliation of the poorest quality could easily render a witch powerless. Even Anna's black fire, strong as it was, would succumb to such a disturbance. Besides, Anna's magic power was shaped like a solid metal cube in the misty world, completely different from the hollow black hole. Another question. Why can magic stones only be activated by magic power? Agatha went on. Even the magic power has become less intense, and the amount of the power left in the stone shouldn't have been reduced. In fact, common people cannot operate the stone at all. The Quest Society has also confirmed that the magic power in the magic stone is not transferable. Therefore, magic stones cannot be used as resources. She paused for a moment and then continued, my supervisor believed only living beings can retain magic power. Magic power just won't work on dead organisms. Its proof is witches' and demons' blood. Most researchers thought so. I don't mind you overturning their conclusion, but magic stones are no different from ordinary gems before they're charged with magic power or become sigils. Roland was silent. It seemed his assumption about magic power intensity was a bit irrational. The thunder of the magic power, however, which looked like black light, was so similar to the God Stone that there must be some connections between the two entities. What else had he overlooked? It was a pity there weren't any reliable observation or analyzing methods in this era. The only way to study magic power was through witches' abilities or via Stone of Measuring. Even so, what he would learn through this method was merely a very generic description of the features of magic power, which was hardly helpful to further research. Roland thought for a while and finally decided to set the matter aside for the time being, hoping he would be able to find an answer during the sigil manufacture process afterwards. 3 days later, the plan for the melting point operation was prepared. Roland sent off the soldiers at the dock in person. This was the first military operation on a big scale where witches acted as chief combatants. There were 2 ships in total, both of which were filled with experienced veterans from the First Army. Brian was the captain. These soldiers all had fought with demonist beasts with Roland upon the city wall before, and fully respected and trusted their lord. When Roland was screening them, he had stressed over and over again that the enemy would be very likely an extremely fierce monster, even more dangerous than demonic hybrids. He had emphasized that anyone who did not wish to participate in the mission could speak up. Nobody had quitted, however, and Nightingale also confirmed that all of them made their decisions at their free will. Despite their resolution and courage, Roland did not overestimate the fighting capacity of these 100 soldiers he was forced to choose, for people in this world naturally feared demons from the bottoms of their hearts. Unlike him, who had seen all kinds of violent scenes on television or in the cinema and would not be surprised by any ferocious monsters, these ordinary people would be horrified. The memory of this upcoming battle would possibly become a nightmare they would remember for the rest of their lives. As such, the carefully selected soldiers would not directly participate in fighting, but would protect along the river 2 or 3 miles away from the actual battlefield. They would only take action if the witches were forced to retreat in the event of an accident. The witches Roland selected were the most powerful ones in the city of Neverwinter, including Anna, Nightingale, Wendy, Leaf, Agatha, Sylvie, Iffy, Lightning and Maggie. According to Agatha, such a combination might be even more than enough to kill the Lord of Hell. Stay safe. Your personal security is your top priority, Roland remarked gravely. You don't have to complete the mission. I'll wait for you all at the castle. Anna went up to hug him. Don't worry. I'll protect them. Me too, Your Majesty. Coo. The little girl and the pigeon hugged Roland, as well. In the end, everybody hugged Roland except Agatha and Iffy. Agatha snorted and muttered to herself. It's just a simple hunting operation, not goodbye forever. If we bid farewell like you guys just did in Tequila prior to every departure, demons would have been right under your noses long before. Iffy, on the other hand, was astounded. It was her first time to hear such a casual order. You don't have to complete the mission but just need to come back home safely. His Majesty was too lenient with witches. Was it not considered an encouragement of cowardice? When she was in the Bloodfang Association, she viewed every battle as a fight to the death. Indeed, there had unfortunately been a few combat witches killed in action during the past several years. The witches who had been unable to complete the master's tasks were severely punished, and were even regarded as useless by the association members. Roland Wimbledon, however, appeared to carry a totally different attitude toward witches. He treated witches neither as beasts nor lambs, but simply as human beings. Strands of smoke escaped from the chimney and with a whistle, the paddle steamer slowly thrust itself forward and took off. Suddenly, Roland felt a pair of invisible hands holding his face. They were cold but soft. Take good care of yourself when I'm away. Don't leave the castle randomly. A familiar voice whispered in his ear. I'll be back soon. After, he felt something had lightly touched his lips. Entirely different from the sensation on the face, the touch was a little sweet and wet. Above all, it was warm. It was a fugitive and illusionary kiss. When Roland finally realized what had happened, he snatched at the air with his hand, only to find nothing was there. As the steam-powered boat was far slower than the balloon, it took them nearly 2 days to reach the end of the Redwater River. At the sight of the towering snowcap, the group of people was awestruck by the magnificent scene before them. As the snow on the mountain melted much slower than that in the forest, the snow water had been accumulating for months. The water ran straight down from the precipice and branched off into various streams upon the projected rocks. From a distance, those streams looked like multiple thin and feeble threads. Upon further exploration, however, they found the streams were as broad as rivers. The water roared and thundered when it flowed into the lake at the foot of the mountain. Obviously, the Redwater River was only one of the exits to the lake. Otherwise, the river would overflow due to the surging water. After a night's rest, the hydrogen balloon rose into the air as it was inflated. In the meantime, the fleet also retreated somewhere 3 kilometers away from the bank and started to build a defensive front along the river. The melting point operation officially began. Chapter 548, Ensnaring the Demons. The far sight carried Wendy and Sylvie to the swirling sea, while Lightning and Maggie hovered on each side of the basket, waiting to fetch them whenever needed. Since their mission was not to investigate the Devil's Town, they did not fly too high. As soon as they flew over the snowcap, Sylvie could look straight through the rocks and cliffs along the bank and catch sight of the eye demon on the top of the Blackstone Pagoda. According to Agatha, eye demons did not need to really see people, because they could sense and locate their enemies upon being noticed. Nobody could possibly escape their scrutiny, neither the invisible nor the ones descending from the sky unless blindfolded. Because of this, eye demons had caused a great number of casualties among the commando of the Blessed Army. Another option was to refrain from looking at eye demons. However, this was fairly hard to achieve due to the fact that eye demons normally stood at the highest point of the campgrounds. How did things go? did you see it? Lightning flew over to ask Sylvie. I need to get a bit closer, otherwise I can't hold up well, Sylvie answered while rubbing her eyes. It took her a lot of magic power to look through obstacles with the eye of magic. Her sight was largely restricted, too. Although she had cautiously managed to reduce her vision to a straight line of sight, she still felt quite dizzy when she captured the details of the fractured precipice. I see. Wendy summoned a gust of wind. Hold on. As the rocks gradually got clearer, the thin red mist slowly entered their sights. Although it was a clear day, a cloud of mist still lingered around the cliff, except that it was a lighter color than the last time they had seen it. Sylvie fixed her eyes once again on the mist. This time, she was finally able to see some earth through the dense mist. A few edifices shaped like towers loomed against the red mist, and the whole scene was like a deserted land. She soon spotted the biggest black stone spire. Compared with the random intrusion last time, the operation this time was carefully planned. They would first startle demons and then induce them to launch an attack. Unlike Lightning, who was always airy and energetic, Sylvie just wanted to live an ordinary life. By no means, she wanted to be an explorer. However, as she was destined to fight the battle of divine will, there was no way for her to stand by no matter how much she hated wars. Just like she had promised Tilly to come to Border Town for the purpose of checking whether Roland was manipulated by witches, she obeyed the order in the same way when Roland disclosed his attacking plan without much hesitation. She had come to check upon Roland for the benefits of all the witches on Sleeping Island. Now she fought for the Witch Union and the entire kingdom of His Majesty's. Sylvie took a deep breath and moved her sight upward. In an instant, hundreds of eyeballs came into her view. The black jelly-like monster was still sitting at its usual spot. Its body had fused with the tower top as if it had grown out of the stone. All of its eyeballs turned to Sylvie simultaneously. She could even catch a glimpse of her own face in those black gleamy eyeballs. For a second, all her hair stood up on its end, and a chill went down her spine. They're coming! She withdrew her power and shouted aloud. Let's go! Ah! Maggie immediately turned into a gigantic devil beast and paused below the basket. Sylvie jumped off the basket and landed firmly on Maggie's broad back, while Lightning carried Wendy on her back and flew toward the misty forest. Unlike the last trip where they had been panicked and frightened, this time they were fully prepared. According to the plan, Lightning would return to where the empty hydrogen balloon was alone and further lure the demons into their traps. Meanwhile, Sylvie turned around and looked back. 5 black dots emerged on the cliff. This number was higher than what Agatha had predicted, but it was still within the safe limit. Nevertheless, she noticed something unusual with the help of the Eye of Magic. Out of the 5 enemies, only 4 rode devil beasts, and 2 of them were very different from regular mad demons. They did not have a big body build, nor did they have strong arms. They were not wearing animal skins or armors as mad demons usually did either, but were in a colorful cope that glowed like a rainbow. Sylvie could not figure out what the cope was made of at first glance. However, she could see something swarming and wriggling underneath the cope like numerous vipers. The heads of the 2 demons were bigger than those of regular mad demons. Yet, their eyes and noses were not distinctive. Their faces were the creepiest kind she had ever seen. They looked like 2 big scars, with red furrows and ridges extending from the center. When she rested her eyes on the last demon, Sylvie was stunned. The demon was wearing a weighty but delicate armor, with a giant heavy sword on his back. Nonetheless, he was not slow in the slightest but flew right after the 4 devil beasts. His face was totally covered by a helmet. Unlike the skull helmet mad demons normally wore, this particular helmet was made of metal, in perfect match with his armor. On both sides of the helmet engraved sophisticated patterns. Several sharp horns, which looked like black stone pagodas at first sight, stuck out from the top. The part where his eyes should be was gleaming with red light, making the demon look vicious and aggressive. What kind of demon is he? Thought Sylvie. Sylvie was taken by fright and horror. As Agatha had never told her how to cope with this situation, she wondered whether she should still follow the original plan. Sylvie felt terribly uneasy. She followed Wendy to the deep forest. When she descended from Maggie's back, she saw a golden figure sprang up into the air and flew toward the balloon at a tremendous speed. It was impossible for her to stop Lightning. After some hesitation, Sylvie felt necessary to inform Agatha of the news. She patted Maggie on her wings and said, "Take me to the ambush area." "What's wrong?" Wendy trotted to her. "Don't we need to meet with the First Army next?" They had been instructed during the maneuver to leave the main battlefield and meet with the First Army as soon as possible after successfully luring demons into the ambush, given that they too were not strong enough to compete against demons. "I saw some strange demons." Sylvie shook her head. "The enemies are not only mad demons. I've got to tell everybody. But the ambush area is pretty large, ah." Maggie threw herself flat on her face. "It may take you a while to find them even if you go." "That's fine. Just take me there." She returned to the beast's back and turned to Wendy. "You go meet with the army at the riverbank. I'll be right back." Lightning flew as fast as she could. The wind whistled in her ears. She saw the earth, woods, rivers, and beaches below quickly shrink and obscure, turning into various color blocks and distorted lines. She must get back to where the hydrogen balloon was before the demons did so. In order to attract the enemy's attention, she had to pretend to be fleeing in a hurry. When the vast ocean gradually came into her view, she finally caught sight of the far side, as well as the demons. Chapter 549, Agatha's Decision. Lightning flew to the bottom of the balloon, found the powder sack affixed to the airbag and pulled out the fuse. Upon seeing the white smoke exiting the powder sack, she immediately flew straight towards the sea. It was a simple self-destruct device. Once the enemies began following the balloon, the decoys must destroy the far side to avoid an embarrassing situation where the demons became too occupied by the novel device instead of chasing the witches. There was a loud explosion just as lightning touched sea. With a flash, the sky lit up. Lightning looked up and saw the airbag puff up and become a huge red fireball with a bright orange color in the middle with dark red smoke rolling on the edges. The flames, like the setting sun, stayed ablaze for quite a long time. She watched a demon come too close to the roaring flames. It flipped over and set itself on fire before falling to the sea with its mount. The other 4 demons, who fled from the smoke below, sprang up toward Lightning. Until now, everything had been going as planned. The demons were not that clever after all. Lightning raised the corner of her mouth and flew close to the sea towards the forest. The plan was to lead them to the depth of the woods where Leaf could control everything. Everything was ready in the hunting ground, and Leaf was waiting quietly for the demons to fall into the trap. The dense branches, vines, and sawgrass would inevitably be a nightmare for the enemies. If they could dream. Sylvie used the Eye of Magic to search the ambush area. The woods under Leaf's control glowed green. From the sky, it was like a flask had embedded in the earth with its mouth facing toward the swirling sea while its neck remained several kilometers away. Despite feeling dizzy, she scanned the inner part of every tree. The numerous details swarming around her head caused great pain. Sylvie finally found Agatha, who hid in a large tree close to the mouth of the flask. "Why did you come here?" The trunk cracked open as Maggie fell to the earth. Agatha poked out her head and asked, "Was the plan for enticing demons unsuccessful?" "No, it worked. 5 demons followed." She jumped down from the mount's back and lifted the white-haired little girl who had returned to her human form. Sylvie hid in the tree hastily. "But 3 of them are different." "What's the difference?" Sylvie detailed the odd demons she had seen and found Agatha in shock. Her heart sank. "Are they difficult to deal with?" Agatha took a long time to recollect herself and then said with an anxious look. "The demons with ropes are fearsome demons, they are horrible killers to common people. But witches don't need to fear them, as long as we avoid looking them in the eye. Underneath their charred face hides the real eyes of fearsome demons." "I see," Sylvie muttered. In ancient witches' stories, their enemies would be terrified immediately by these demons and then they would feel afraid, timid, confused and desperate. A mortal troop of around 100 men could often be routed by only 3 or 4 fearsome demons. Most people were too fearful to think. They just knelt down in tremor waiting to be slain. Even if the God's stone of retaliation could weaken this effect greatly, it could not remove such feelings completely. The demons seemed to be born with this ability to control people's emotions, and no obvious fluctuation of their magic power could be perceived. What about the armored demon? It can fly alone, is it the Lord of Hell? No. Agatha spoke in a rough, low voice. If your description is correct, my guess is that it's probably a senior demon. We're in trouble. Senior demon? Sylvie was bewildered. The Union knows little about them, except that they possess many abilities and look like humans, except they are much larger. Both their strength and magic power are quite strong. She swallowed hard. It's said that only Transcendents can compete against them. Transcendents? We don't even have an extraordinary now. Sylvie was nervous. Inform Leaf to stop this plan. We should retreat and meet the First Army. Agatha bit her lip. It can fly alone because of the Stone of Flight. In fact, it's not a big problem if there's only Lightning and Maggie because they can fly. However, we're impossible to escape from their attack once we're out of Leaf's protection. Although I've never seen a real senior demon, I was told by Alice before that witches must be concentrated on fighting with these crafty and strong demons, or we're likely to die because of just a tiny miss. She beat the trunk until Leaf's voice came from above. I'm listening. What's up? Agatha said firmly, the plan has changed. Please inform all the witches we are changing from Plan A to Plan B. Let Nightingale watch over the armored demon. Don't hesitate to kill it if Anna gets the chance. Plan B meant dropping the pan of capturing and using the Sigil of God's will to wipe out all the enemies. Will we really combat with the senior demon? Sylvie could not help holding Maggie tight. Escape only leads to death, while there will be a chance to survive if we try our best to combat with them. Agatha spoke slowly. A senior demon always comes out with a number of other demons, but now they just have 2 fearsome demons as the guards. So we are likely to win even if there isn't a Transcendent. I see lightning, Leaf said again. They're coming. Shoo. Sylvie held her breath. She heard roaring sounds from the treetop, and then she heard heavy objects falling to the ground in front. The sounds of the demons' rapid paces echoed in the jungle, and soon died away. Only the devil beast's low roar remained. How is it going now? The armored demon hasn't landed yet and it's still following Lightning. The other demons left their mounts outside the woods and followed her too. Wait. A demon is missing. Sylvie looked carefully at the surroundings. There were only 3 devil beasts left near us. Good. Let me kill these fool reptiles first so that they can't escape even if they want to. Agatha opened the crack. You're not a combat witch. Please just stay hidden here. But they can fly. Sylvie worried. What if they want to escape by flying? Take it easy. She looked at the little girl who wanted to join. Don't worry. We have Maggie. A devil beast suddenly fell from the sky, appeared behind them, spread its wings while rotating its tail and roared loudly at the 3 devil beasts. They were distracted immediately. To Sylvie's surprise, the 3 devil beasts imitated Maggie and also spread their wings and wagged their tails, as if they were dancing. In order to gain more performance space, they pushed each other and refused to back off. Were they entertaining her? On the other side, Agatha snuck out of the forest. A layer of white ice crystal formed on the ground. Chapter 550, The Slaughter. It was Sylvie's first time seeing such an incredible method of movement. As Agatha moved, a mirror-like road, paved by crystal ice, would appear just ahead of her. She seemed to be floating along the road, almost as if the ground was pushing her forward. In a flash, she had arrived at the rear of the first devil beast. When Agatha stretched out her hands, the frost suddenly appeared around the grassland and it even started to snow. After a moment, the devil beast gave out a shriek and it tried to fly, only to find it could not move at all. Each of its 4 strong limbs had been frozen in place and the ice crystals continued to move up along them, completely freezing its body and wings in no time. Almost simultaneously, Maggie threw herself onto the back of the dancing devil beast and snapped at its neck with her huge crimson mouth. The devil beast was in such a panic and it wanted to get rid of Maggie. However, Maggie was much larger. The devil beast was like a baby beast that was being suppressed by a full-grown beast. Then, Maggie got a grip and broke its neck completely. At last, the devil beast was defeated and with a final swish of its tail, it shattered the poor frozen beast, smashing it to pieces. At this moment, the third devil beast began to realize what had just happened. Although it did not understand why its kind would kill each other, he knew something bad had happened and it spread its long wings and rose into the air. But it was too late. Agatha followed it and also flew. Or rather, she was walking in the air. The ice crystals also extended to the devil beast and for a while, it formed a bridge in the air. Agatha ran along the ice bridge and soon she was close enough she could use her magic power to attack this devil beast. Sylvie could not help but cover her mouth in shock. Like a swift viper, the ice bridge froze the tail of the devil beast and then quickly turned the rest of it into an ice sculpture. Probably due to the heavy weight of the frozen beast, the end of the ice bridge tilted, cracked, and then snapped. Agatha began to fall from the bridge. Fortunately, Maggie caught her. However, the ice sculpture fell to the ground and broke into thousands of pieces. It took less than 20 seconds for them to kill all 3 of the demonic beasts. This was the way in which senior witches engaged in a combat. Sylvie could not help but feel envious of Agatha. Gotcha. After checking the bullets in the barrel, Nightingale shut the cartridge. Just then, she heard Leaf's warnings about the changes made to the enemy attacks, and that Plan A for the melting point action had changed to Plan B. That meant Effie's task had been cancelled and it was her turn to combat these enemies. But, what was most important was for them to provide opportunities for Anna to discharge the sigil of God's will. Nightingale could not help but recall Roland's words once she thought of Anna. Anyway, take her back, please. I'll leave it all to you. She clutched her chest and bit her lip. This plan should be completed with ease, but she found an indescribable emotion in her heart. As the task became increasingly tougher, the emotion became unexpectedly stronger. If the most terrible thing happened, that would mean Anna could also die, she thought. Oh, no, unless I die. Nightingale shook her head and suppressed this horrible idea. Roland trusted her the most, so she could not let him down. Even if Roland did not instruct her to do so specifically, she would protect Anna at all costs. In a sense, Anna was the savior of all the witches in the Witch Cooperation Association. She would never forgive herself if Anna died because of her selfishness. The enemies are coming. Leaf gave her a warning and Nightingale gathered herself. She was ready to outflank the enemies as soon as their direction was pointed out by Leaf. Her world of mist was commonly a desolate and dull place. Anything mundane and not related to magic power would become nothing more than twisted lines and changeable black and white blocks. This was her first time seeing so many colors, thanks to the demons. Beside the green forest, she could see a muted yellow arm from one of the mad demons and its inside emitting a shade of light blue. The other 2 demons should be the fearsome demons that Leaf had just mentioned. They had a stronger magical resonance and she could see many magic swirls inside their bodies. The one on their forehead was the most obvious. Another senior demon, which they needed to keep a particularly close eye on, was not among them. If their intelligence was correct, it should be monitoring everything from above the forest. Without a doubt, the fearsome demons, which would cause fear, should be the first to kill. And it should be done before they opened their eyes. After the 3 demons passed through the ambush points, Nightingale held the gun with both hands and used her instant leap to travel more than 10 meters in the twinkling of an eye. She pointed her gun at the back of the fearsome demon's head. It was so close to her that she did not even have to leave her mist. As long as she had some luck, the gun barrel would not be split in half by the powerful magic. She immediately shot and for a moment, there was a thunderous roar. In the mist, the fearsome demons had abruptly puffed up, as if the unstoppable bullet had been shot from inside of its head and blown outward. Its brain exploded, spilling brain matter in all directions. Next, a hail of fog soared skyward. Nightingale noticed its red mist vessel was hidden directly inside its body. The other fearsome demon turned around quickly, and its bloody scar expanded across its face, trying to reveal its fearsome eyes. Suddenly several vines shot from the top of a tree, intertwining its head and pulling its head back before the eyes could be revealed. At this moment, a mad demon in the front turned around at the sound of the gunshot and ended up staring at the fearsome demon and could not help but tremble with fear. Nightingale shot the 3 remaining bullets into the fearsome demon, which had been forcibly pulled back by Leaf. Meanwhile, Anna leaped from her hiding place in the tree and cut the beast into pieces with her black fire before the mad demon could recover itself from the fear. "Be careful!" Lightning, who had been enticing the enemies into the air, shouted. Nightingale looked up and found that a large sword was about to slash her. She instinctively tried to enter the mist, but unexpectedly, her misty world was broken into pieces by the enemy who was wielding the sword. "What's this ability? It can break my magic power," she thought. It was too late for her to escape. Suddenly a black curtain spread out above her head and withstood the sword's attack. Unlike an actual curtain, it seemed to have more of a mirror-like surface, and she could even see her shocked expression reflected on its surface. "This is the black fire." Bang! The sword hit the black fire fiercely and Anna looked pained, her body shaking, but her black fire remained intact. Without any hesitation, this time, Nightingale caught Anna quickly and summoned the mist again, escaping to a safe place over 20 meters away, instantly. Meanwhile, the armored demon also slowly fell towards the ground. The death of its partner did not seem to have any impact on it. The demon calmly lifted the large sword, engraved with a strange pattern, and suddenly the magic power surged toward the blade of the sword. The blade gave off a dazzling glow. Chapter 551, The Senior Demon. "This is the sigil of God's will." Nightingale widened her eyes in surprise. But soon, she found something different. Through the mist she saw a black hole formed in the enemy's palm instead of the characteristic dazzling light of the magic stones. It was not a sigil but an ability of the demon. Shining magic power was sucked into the black hole and became a fast-growing vortex which gave off such a strong light that it made it hard for the other witches to open their eyes. However, seeing it through the mist, it was getting darker and darker. The demon then thrust its sword into the ground, sending out a black shimmering light to cover the entire woods. Instantly, the light of magic powers that were flickering like candlelight in the wind was put out. Nightingale's misty world was broken down again. Leaf was forced out of her heart of forest form and the trees promptly threw Leaf and Iffy onto the ground. Leaf was heavily injured. She was spewing blood and she was not able to stand up again. Nightingale was shocked and she thought the demon sensed that the wood was Leaf. No. Though Leaf hid well, it was still possible to see her movements from above. The really strange thing is, why could it break the magic power like the god stone of retaliation? Compared with magic stones, the demon can release such magic power and is even more flexible in manipulating it, but there's no light when it was releasing the magic power. Nightingale did not have time to think about it anymore. Enduring the discomfort after having her magic power broken off, she changed the cartridge and dashed towards the demon, who was now walking to the paralyzed and defenseless Leaf after its previous black shimmering light attack. When Nightingale came to a place about 10 meters away from the demon and was sure that she could hit it, she swiftly pulled the trigger. The bullets hit its armor, creating sparkles and smoke. The demon seemed very annoyed at being disturbed by someone else at this moment. It roared in anger and then held its giant sword up in front of itself. Seeing this, Nightingale's heart sank. The bullets did not get into the demon's body through its arm to break its inner organs as she had expected. In fact, she was not sure whether the bullets had broken through the armor or not, let alone this giant sword, which was as thick as a door plank. As she had already used all the 5 bullets, she drew out her dagger and lunged towards the head of the demon. In order to save Leaf, she had to try her best to stop it. The demon promptly lifted up its sword to strike, with its eyes shining like bright red lights. Though it moved incredibly fast, Nightingale could still predict its action. She did not dodge the striking sword. Just at the moment when the blade was going to cut her in half, she disappeared in the mist. The demon's lightless wave could wipe out the effects of magic power in a large area, but it could not completely prohibit the magic power. After the vortex vanished, the witches could use their magic power again. Nightingale's keen eye caught this change immediately, as she had the ability to observe the flow of magic power. In the world of black and white, she saw the giant sword silhouette instantly distort and quickly found the cutting point in the blade. She slid through the blade and stabbed her dagger into a gap in the demon's helmet. Surprisingly, the dagger cracked after a loud bang. This is a magic barrier? Damn it, how many kinds of abilities does it have? Nightingale hurriedly retreated and soon the armored demon caught up with her. It used one hand to raise its sword and struck again. She played the same old trick, hoping to escape in the mist, but this time she was not that lucky. The demon lifted his other hand into the air. It pulled Nightingale out of the mist as she was moving through the sword. When she was pulled out, part of the blade was still inside her body. As she was thrown out, blood spilled out from a long, deep wound in her waist left by the blade. Even the protective clothing that had been specially made by Soraya was torn. Nightingale gave out a choked cry. Without time to attend to the wound, she made use of the force of falling to roll backwards, hoping to dodge the demon's coming attack. Unfortunately, this demon could move over 2 meters with a single step. It was impossible for her to escape from such a strong enemy that moved as fast as an extraordinary. When the sword was about to cut Nightingale, many purple beams of the light suddenly appeared around the demon and then quickly contracted inward to tie the demon tightly. That was Iffy's magic cage. Crush it! Nightingale shouted. I can't do it. Iffy grated. It's too strong. She had squeezed her hand into a fist, but the beams of the light could not contract anymore. Instead, the beams shook as if the demon was going to break them apart. The demon gave out a deafening roar and threw up its arms. The cage split up, but before it could raise its sword again, beams of light came back to trap it once more. Miss and Anna use the golden thunder now. Be quick. Iffy said in a measured voice. It was easy to tell from her face that the cage could not trap the demon for a very long time. However, the demon was not far away from Iffy. The golden thunder of the sigil of gods would probably strike both of them. Now, Anna. Nightingale shouted to Anna in a distant place. Activate the sigil. Anna caught Nightingale's eyes and immediately got what she meant. She used all her power to lift the metal sheet in her hand. A strong bright light lit up the woods and some beams of light also came down from the sky. The demon held. It might have seen this kind of scene before, as now it sounded angry and at the same time frightened, struggling even harder to get free. Nightingale knew this was their only chance to win, as the demon now could not dispel their magic power. The golden thunder struck. Nightingale pressed on her wound and moved into the mist. Before the dark lightning struck on Iffy's head, she suddenly appeared behind her, held her up and leaped aside, swiftly pulling her out of the sigil of God's will's attack range. She saved Iffy in only 2 steps. The move needed not only determination and courage, but also teamwork between Nightingale and Anna. If Anna struck in a wrong place, Nightingale and Iffy could hardly escape from the coming golden thunder. However, Nightingale trusted her. She believed that nobody could overtake Anna in terms of magic power control. And the result proved that Nightingale was right. The strong golden light instantly covered the place where the senior demon stood and destroyed everything in the area, including the wheat and vines. Anna staggered. She finally couldn't keep her feet on the ground anymore and fell down. Anna! Leaf cried out. She had just recovered a little and stumbled towards Anna. She's fine. She just exhausted her magic power, said Nightingale. Every word she spoke was contorted by the searing pain caused by the wound on her waist. Luckily the inner organs were all right. As long as she avoided violent movements that would open the wound up again, it was not life-threatening. You got injured? Let me bind it up for you, Iffy said. A mixed feeling was obvious on her face. Nightingale nodded and she was about to roll up her clothing when suddenly, she froze. Seeing a black figure slowly walking out of the smoke caused by the golden thunder. Several thorns on the demon's helmet broke, looking like collapsed stone towers. Its delicate armor was cracked and covered by dirt. It had lost an arm and the giant sword. But it surprisingly survived the fatal strike. The demon hissed hideously. Nightingale was not sure whether it was smiling, but she could tell from its voice that it sounded excited and murderous. Although it seemed that the demon could not move as rapidly as before and with a much dimmer red light, would fall in any minute, Nightingale still thought no one could stop it now because herself and Leaf were paralyzed, Anna fainted, Lightning was missing and Iffy had nearly no power left. Just at the moment, the witch beside her stood up. "Hey, what are you doing?" Nightingale said in a low voice. "Fight till the last moment." Iffy drew out a dagger and said. "It's the fate of a combat witch. Don't you still have some magic power left? Take them with you and hide. If you're unable to take all of them, at least, take one with you." Nightingale suddenly thought of Roland's entrustment. "Yes, at least, I should take Anna back. That's what I've promised His Majesty. I have to do it no matter what." A familiar howl from above suddenly interrupted Nightingale's thought. A huge shadow landed from the sky. Chapter 552, The Super Magic. The demon looked up, and the next moment it was instantly stomped into the ground by Maggie. Nightingale felt that the strong impact even made the earth tremble a little. And she thought that if it was an ordinary person, the impact would have definitely smashed its bones. "Well done, Maggie. Stomp it to death," Leaf said, clenching her hands into fists. "Bite it. Whip it with your tail." Iffy was so excited that she loudly shouted. "Ah!" Maggie howled cheerfully. She put Agatha down and was going to beat the demon again. Just at that moment, she uncontrollably transformed from a fierce devil beast back into a little girl, falling to sit on the ground, at a loss to understand what happened. "It's a super magic!" Agatha yelled. She was the first to react. She lifted up an ice spike from under the ground, which she crashed into the demon and sent it flying out, breaking several trees. Giving the demon no chance to catch a breath, she immediately caught up with it and froze its feet. "Now," she shouted back at Maggie. Maggie came to her senses and drew a pistol, aiming and firing continuously at the frozen target. Nightingale bit her lips and reloaded her gun. She asked Iffy to help her up to her feet and then walked to join Maggie. The demon's magic barrier shined on its armor, but it soon dimmed down. The red light in its eyes was flickering on and off. Suddenly, it roared hoarsely and threw its hand toward Agatha and sent her flying backward without even touching her. At the same time, the ice crystals around its feet melted instantly. It jumped up and staggered, wanting to escape. "Don't let it go!" Agatha shouted. "Maggie! Let me stop it!" Leaf grabbed the Sigil of God's Will from Anna's hand. She had not consumed very much magic power in the previous fight, though she was severely injured when she was forcibly pulled out from her Heart of Forest form. During their regular tests, she was able to light up 4 stones of the sigil, and now, immediately after she injected all her magic power into the sigil, a bright golden light lit up the woods once again. The demon turned around and let out a strange sound in disbelief. The golden thunder struck the demon again. This time, he did not survive it. "The demon is dead?" Nightingale asked in a weak voice. "Only half of its armor is left behind," Maggie answered while dragging the enemy back. If it was not for the delicate glyph on the edge of the armor, it would be hard to believe that this charred mass was the demon itself. Apparently, it was not as strong as they had imagined. Lightning was found, too. When the demon released the black waving, she was affected and lost her magic power temporarily. She had fallen from above, hit her head on a branch and fainted. Luckily, as she had not been high up in the sky and the thick branches and leaves of the trees had acted as a cushion to her fall, she was not heavily injured, except for a bump on her head. However, she still looked upset and disappointed because she missed the fight. After making sure that everybody was all right, she said, "I'll inform Brian of the situation here and ask him to send someone to fetch you." "You survived." "That's a miracle," Agatha exclaimed. "Yeah, I don't know how to tell His Majesty that all of us got beat up by just one demon." Nightingale heaved a sigh, enduring the pain. "No, Nightingale. This isn't an ordinary victory. The enemy is a super magic." Agatha shook her head and continued, "Maybe several senior witches could confront a senior demon, but they could never defeat a super magic. Only the 3 chiefs of the Union could compete with it." "Only the Transcendents?" Leaf asked, frowning. "Yes." Agatha confirmed and added, "The Union paid with blood for this lesson." "What kind of ability does a super magic have?" "Super magic is just a title, instead of a certain kind of ability," Agatha explained. "Every senior demon has many kinds of abilities, and different from witches, demons don't have to get their abilities through awakening. Someone in the Union once witnessed a senior demon, who had led the enemy to attack Tequila many times, that evolved 2 different magic cyclones inside its body in merely several years. That means it gained 2 more abilities during that time. No one knew how it did that. The demons seem to be more naturally talented than us in manipulating the magic power. A super magic doesn't refer to a demon with certain kinds of magic cyclones, but refers to an extremely powerful senior demon, who can release power to create the effects similar to those of a god's stone." The last sentence from Agatha made Nightingale's heart skip a beat. "You mean, it can prohibit magic power?" she asked. "To be more accurate, it interferes with magic power." Agatha corrected her and continued, "The super magic is able to break through the defense of the god's stone of retaliation and can obstruct or diminish the magic power attacks. They can also dispel or stop magic power effects. They're really tough opponents for all the witches." "I don't understand." Iffy was confused and asked, "Why is that not a special ability?" "It's not," Agatha answered. "Take Anna for example. If she was a super magic, her black fire will remain effective even under the influence of the god's stone of retaliation, and at the same time, the place affected by black fire will become an interference region. That means, the other magic power effects near the black fire will be wiped out unless Anna's opponent is another super magic." What Agatha said immediately reminded Nightingale of the demon's lightless black hole. She recalled the whole process of the previous battle, and remembered that there was only the dim shadow around the demon when she hit on its magic barrier and was caught by it in the mist. She was surprised to find that the demon attacked as if it was the sigil of God's will, giving out absolutely no magic power light during the fighting. She told Agatha what she had seen through the mist during the fight and then asked, "That's why the first strike of the sigil of God's will didn't kill it?" "Probably," Agatha shrugged and said. "But I'm not sure. This is the first time for me to encounter this kind of demon, and the Union left no record about using the sigil of God's will to fight against a super magic. So the chiefs of the Union depended completely on their own power to defeat the super magic?" "Exactly," Agatha said while nodding. "Extraordinaries are really powerful, especially when they wear the god's stone of retaliation. They shine like the sun in the battlefields. Wherever they go, demons would melt like the snow in the spring, and transcendents are the center of the sun. If you could see Lord Alice in a fight, you would be overwhelmed by her power." Hearing that, Nightingale was deep in thought. Counting all the chiefs of the Union, there were only 3 transcendents. She then asked, "Know which of the Union had become a super magic before?" "As far as I know, no," Agatha answered, "and no one will. Witches and demons have fundamental differences. Numerous demons can evolve into mad demons, but not many of us can become someone like Alice, no matter how hard we practice." Maggie, who kept fiddling with the demon's armor, found a little black box from the remains of the demon and said, "Look." "What's this?" Agatha took the box and tried to open it. "It's locked." "Let me try." Nightingale observed the square metal box through the mist, and when its silhouette was distorting, she put her fingers into it and grabbed the contents out of the box. Several glittering stones fell out of the air. Chapter 553, The Trophy. "Gems? Coup." Maggie parted the white hair covering her forehead to reveal her curious eyes. "They're magic stones," said Agatha. She picked the stones up to take a closer look and added, "I've no idea what kinds of magic stones they are, but judging from their color, they must be high-quality god stones of retaliation before being changed into magic stones by the Chaos Beast. The trophy we get from a senior demon must be something good," Leaf said while smiling. "I'm just surprised that it hid the box inside its body." "Oh, you remind me. Are there boxes like this one in the other dead demons' bodies?" "Cool. I'll go and check," Maggie said excitedly. "Watch out for the tanks restoring the red mist," Agatha warned. In less than 10 minutes, Maggie came back with 2 black boxes in her hands and said, "I found them in the demons wearing colorful clothes." Nightingale pulled some magic stones out from the 2 boxes, though they were dimmer and smaller than the stones of the first box. Agatha gathered all the magic stones together and then could not help but frown. "Is there anything wrong?" asked Nightingale. "It seems that there are too many magic stones," Agatha answered. "Isn't it a happy thing for you to get so many of them?" asked Nightingale. Agatha shook her head slightly and explained, "The Union killed thousands of fearsome demons, but it was still hard to collect magic stones. That's why the Quest Society did everything to capture and raise chaos beasts." "Why do they carry so many magic stones?" "Maybe that's their savings, accumulated in over 400 years? It's just like an unlucky guy who pooled all his savings, hoping to start a peaceful life in his hometown, but got killed and robbed by us on the way," Nightingale suggested with a strained smile. However, no one laughed. All of them knew clearly that if the numerous demons had been producing magic stones in the past 400 years, they now must have an incredible amount of war resources. To break the dead silence, Agatha said, "Well, it's no use thinking too much. After all, we have to fight against them anyway. There are no two ways about it." Guided by lightning, the First Army finally arrived at the woods. "Are you all right?" Wendy hurriedly jumped off Lightning's back to check the witches one by one. "Anna. Don't worry. She just fainted because of magic power exhaustion," Nightingale comforted Wendy. "Everybody is all right. I've told her, but she just kept rushing me," said Lightning. Her head had been wrapped up, and only several wisps of hair could be seen on her forehead. What are these? Are they demons?" Brian asked in shock, looking at the bodies put in a row on the ground. "Yes, dead demons. You have to tell your soldiers to bring them back, including their remains, armors, clothes, and weapons. None of those things should be left behind. That's His Majesty's order." Nightingale shrugged and said, "Yes. I'll take care of this." Brian's face suddenly hardened, hearing the order. "What a pity. We didn't catch a demon alive. The plan to make sigils has to be postponed again," Agatha said with a sigh. "A living demon? There's probably one." Lightning tilted her head and said, "What? Where?" All the people simultaneously turned to look at Lightning. "I'm not sure, but if the demon can swim, maybe it's still alive," she said while blinking. In the afternoon, the paddle steamers left the harbor and turned back to sail towards the city of Neverwinter. The curious and surprised soldiers of the First Army crowded on the deck of a steamer. "This is the enemy that we're going to fight against in the future? It looks just so, except the huge, intimidating figure." "Hush. What did you say? Haven't you seen that even His Majesty's powerful witches were heavily injured? Don't you know how powerful they are?" Someone interrupted. "Yes, those dead demons must be fierce, at least, much tougher than the demonic beasts. Even the powerful Lady Anna fainted." Another one added, "Yeah, she was the one who sealed the breach in the city wall and blocked a large group of demonic beasts on her own." The other soldiers agreed. "Yeah. I was there too. Lady Anna saved my life. If it wasn't her, I'd already be stomped to death by the demonic boars. Unfortunately, Miss Angel isn't here. Otherwise, they would have been cured right now." Hearing what the soldiers said, Nightingale and Agatha standing at the stern of the steamer looked at each other and then shook their heads with a smile. Both of them found what they heard very incredible. Since she came from the time when the witches had ruled the human world and enslaved the common people, Agatha had a brand new feeling towards the ordinary people when she heard that they considered witches comrades in arms. Nightingale, who had had to hide from the ordinary people for a very long time and had suffered from the coercion of the church, also felt for the first time that the ordinary people were able to accept the witches and even willing to fight side by side with them. "What do you think about it?" Nightingale asked. "You mean the test target?" "I think we were so lucky to capture it alive when we believed that we were going back empty-handed," Agatha said with a smile. The test target, the living mad demon locked in an iron cage, attracted the soldiers to flock to have a look at it. According to Lightning, the flames from the explosion of the hydrogen balloon hurt and battered this unlucky demon unconscious, causing it to fall into the water. After it regained consciousness, it had struggled for half a day, trying to swim to the bank, but had failed since it had been so badly injured. In the end, it was caught by Maggie, who said that the mad demon must have mistaken her for a devil beast, thinking that it had come to its rescue and had cried out loudly to catch her attention. It never expected that it would become the witch's captive. As if he was pushed to the limit of her magic power and physical strength, she probably could not trap the demon for a very long time. After discussion, the witches decided to cut all its limbs and let Agatha freeze the wounds. By doing so, the demon could neither kill itself nor die before it used up the red mist. It's hard to believe that we can still complete the task after the sudden, terrible accident. We're so lucky. Nightingale twitched her mouth and said. "Oh, don't you need some rest?" Agatha asked, pointing at her waist. "It's fine after the herbal treatment. Before we met His Majesty Roland, Leaf took care of the wounds for all the sisters in the Witch Cooperation Association," Nightingale said lightly while throwing up her hands. "I'm not prudent enough in this action. Fortunately, everyone is fine," Agatha said and heaved a sigh. "You mean the senior demons? That's not your fault. No one could predict that they would appear in this remote place," Nightingale consoled her. "And that's what makes me confused. The senior demons have never acted alone. They usually hid behind a huge army of demons, and they were few in number. During the decades of the battle, the Union had recorded all of the senior demons that appeared. There were less than 20 of them, including those killed in the battle." Agatha paused for a while and continued. "I thought I had to wait until the bloody moon came to see them, but now I'm not sure, after seeing the magic stones." Nightingale soon got what she meant, and that idea sent a chill to her heart. The demon's lifespan, growth limit, evolution way, and reproduction way still remain unknown to us. What did they do in the past 400 years? Assuming they've accumulated so many magic stones, is it possible that they may also have many more senior demons now? Chapter 554, Reaching the City of Neverwinter. "There are so many boats here," Edith thought, lying beside the porthole of the poop deck. She glanced over to see the fleets that were coming and going on the Redwater River. Since she entered the western region, she noticed that many strange concrete boats were sailing on the river with no wind sail, making the stream a very crowded one. And according to Shipmaster's introduction, they were called paddle steamers. They relied on steam power to march forward, and their speed could not be influenced by the wind. It was said that even if you sail upstream, they were faster than the sailing ship. A paddle steamer usually marched in front of other boats on the river with a string of black smoke lagging behind. No one could clearly explain how the steam pushed the big wooden wheel on both sides of the boat. While one thing was certain, these things were made in the city of Neverwinter. Edith secretively made some estimates that almost every hour there would be one paddle steamer passing by. If it was cargo that these ships carried, then there was no doubt that the amount of material the city of Neverwinter was importing would be astonishing. She learned from businessmen that a city could not be bigger than its ability to import materials. You could get a rough idea about how prosperous this city was and how many business opportunities it could offer, if you just stayed for a couple of days on the city's main road. You would even know what the most popular goods of the city were if you were good at communication. Obviously, the Redwater River was the most important main road for the western region. And watching this busy streamway, she believed all the propaganda she had seen in the King's City might be more than just Roland, His Majesty's brag. In such a short time, Roland had integrated the western region into one new city whose permanent population and commercial trade had outperformed the old King's City. Such an outstanding heir to the throne actually had a bad reputation of being ignorant and stubborn. Thinking of these rumors, Edith was more interested in Roland Wimbledon. "Miss Conrad, are you observing the boat again?" The door was pushed open, a well-dressed, brown-haired, handsome man walked in. "Want to go out to breathe some fresh air? You must be bored of staying here all the time?" "No, this place is nice." Edith stood up and nodded to him. "Thank you for your hospitality." "You don't need to thank me," he laughed and said, "I'm lucky to have such a beautiful lady's company." Edith had heard too much of these kinds of compliments, but she still replied with a delightful look, "Without your help, I'm afraid I may have had to crash with the cargo and refugees." "Of course I couldn't stand by and let this kind of things happen," the man sat opposite and said. "There's no one jeweler who's willing to let jewelry be covered with dust, and you're just like jewelry to me." This man was Victor, the owner of the Everspring boat. He was a jeweler from the King's City. After their original boat was burned, Edith quickly picked out this two-master ship from all the ships that traveled to the western region. It was not a passenger boat, neither did it accept any employment. It was Victor's private ship. But for the Pearl of the Northern region, as long as the shipowner was a male, everything was fine. She pretended to be a noble lady from the northern region, who came to the western region to find her missing relatives. With a couple of words, she made Victor feel sorry for her and invite her aboard the Everspring voluntarily. Compared with the common miniature sailing boats and freighters, the Everspring was spacious and bright, with a comfortable passenger cabin in the poop deck. Besides, it did not have the odors of the rotten wood that were caused by the long-time aquatic travel. Victor even arranged 2 servants for her, without charging a single gold royal from her. Of course, the only price she needed to pay was to endure Victor's visits from time to time, showing his generosity and concern, but for Edith, who had been good at running around the circles of the noble, it was just a piece of cake, as she had already gotten used to it. And if he was good enough, she would enjoy the feeling of controlling him. "Although these ships can sail without the push of the wind, it's all too crude," Victor said and poured a cup of black tea for himself. "I boarded a paddle steamer and carefully observed it. It's noisy and shaking when sailing. It may be a good choice for transporting goods, but not the best choice for a long journey." "Of course it won't be as comfortable as the Everspring," Edith laughed and said, "but why do I feel that these boats just popped out in a night? There weren't such kinds of boats in the western region before, I suppose?" "Yes, you're right. They just sprang up overnight." Victor twitched his lips and added, "I used to travel for businesses to Longsong Stronghold and there weren't these kinds of strange things back then. After just a winter, they're everywhere now." "Making 20 or 30 paddle steamers in one winter?" Edith thought in surprise. As the heir of the Comte family, she knew exactly what the meaning of it was. Since a big city needed to import a lot of material, the city expansion was limited by the ability of its transportation ability for material. These kinds of non-sailing boats which could be produced so quickly were obviously good to improve the city's transportation ability, as they could continually transport food and commodities from everywhere to the western region. Given that, the expansion speed of the city of Neverwinter would naturally be beyond everyone's imagination. As for the noises and shaking, it was not worthy of mention. "Look, Miss Conrad, no need to worry about those ugly concrete boats. I have something more interesting here. It may help you to kill the time." Victor called the maid beside him, whispering a few words in her ear, and then she nodded, turned around and left the room. "What's it?" "Something that can match with your beauty," he gloated and said, "it's also my old profession." The maid quickly came back to the poop deck with an exquisite album in her hand. Victor spread it out in front of Edith. "Which one do you like?" There were many dazzling crystal pictures on the parchment, which were definitely lifelike, with fine brushwork and bright colors. Obviously, the painter that made this album was an expert in doing his job. Are these gems? Precisely, they're rough stones. Victor explained to her patiently. I set the prices in accordance with the album's standard when I purchased them. Compared with the polished jewelry, the rough stones have their own charms. If you're interested in any kind of rough stones, please let me know. Of course, if you prefer the polished jewelry, I could ask some jewelers to use these rough stones to make some jewelry for you when I get back to the King's City. Nothing original, Edith just flipped over the album and then gave it back to him. Thanks, but no. Victor was surprised when he got the book. So aren't you interested in these at all? My relatives are missing. I don't have the mood to pick these luxury gifts. Please forgive me, Edith answered in a low voice. If she promised him now, he would pester her when they arrived in the city of Neverwinter, which would be a hindrance. Although most of the females would give in to these sparkling things, she would rather appreciate the steam engine that drove the paddle steamer. Compared with the jewelry which only spread among the nobles, those were much more valuable. Soon after Victor left, there came a series of deep and rich ringing sounds from the direction of the bow. It seemed that a big fleet was about to leave the harbor. Looking to the harbor, Edith could see the bulkhead line becoming clearer and clearer in front of her. Chapter 555, The Beginning of the Negotiation. So this is Border Town, no, City of Neverwinter? Edith could not help but feel surprised, seeing the busy and orderly scene in front of her after walking down the gangway ladder. She had had many assumptions prior to her arrival, but found that she had belittled this city. The harbor was 3 times bigger than that of the King's City. One side of the dock was crowded with sailing ships and concrete boats, busy unloading cargo. Mountains of minerals and coals were heaped up in the yard. On the other side of the dock, 10 paddle steamers were departing in a row from the trestle. Many citizens stood beside the shore to see them off. All the crews wore uniforms, standing in straight lines along both sides of the boat. Edith could feel their high morale. There was a kind of expression on their faces, the same kind that appeared on knights' faces when they came back after defeating their enemies. Yet there was no doubt, these people were definitely not the noble. The center of the dock was the gathering place for businessmen, refugees, and migrants, most of whom had arrived via various types of sailing vessels. After they disembarked, they were separated by a group of men in black. They were asked to stand in line to pass the barrier after the examination. The floating population in the dock area was over 1,000. Even the King's City was overshadowed by such a splendid scene. The dock has grown longer again. Victor commented with surprise. Does His Majesty plan to turn the whole river bank into the dock area? Again? Edith noticed his words. The dock wasn't this wide last autumn, he opened his arms and said. There weren't so many people either. What are they doing in the barrier, taking taxes? There are no downtown taxes here. You need to pay taxes only when you have sold out your commodities, Victor enthusiastically explained. Besides, in the downtown, people are not allowed to set up stalls unofficially. All transactions must take place in the convenience market. Those men in black act as patrol teams for the other cities. They set a barrier to register people's identities and to eliminate demonic plague. Not to blackmail? Edith asked and winked at her brother, who nodded and took out his wallet, ready to give money to pull strings. No, Miss Conrad, I said they're just like a patrol team. The jeweler, Victor laughed and waved his hand. In fact, they never charge extra money. I know it's hard to believe, but this is the truth. I was as surprised as you when I passed the examination for the first time. Come with me. It's quicker to take the businessman pass. Just as Victor had described, after the men in black verified his identity, they let them all pass the barrier without charging even 1 bronze royal. I need to find a clean and comfortable hotel to check in, and then I'm going to pop into the convenience market, Victor said and turned around. What about you, Miss Conrad? If you're unfamiliar with this place, I'm at your service. Thank you. Edith put on a grateful look, lifted her skirt and bowed, saying, You've done me many courtesies during this journey. That's enough. I'll go to the city hall to ask for help. I should be able to get some information about my relatives there. It takes no effort, my lady. Besides, it's my pleasure to know a distinguished noblewoman like you. Please don't mention it. After several evasions, Edith finally got rid of Victor, but the businessman continued to wave at her while leaving. He said if they were in any trouble, they could go to the Holy Mountain Hotel to find him anytime. Sister, how popular you are. Cole smacked his lips. Edith glanced at him. What should you call me? Ugh, well, Miss Edith. The Duke's second son could not help shuddering. Shall we find a hotel and check in? No, we should go to the castle to hand over the document, she said without hesitation. We should get in contact with His Majesty as soon as possible. But we don't have the heads anymore. Cole reminded her in a low voice. Then we'll do things under no-head circumstances. Edith shrugged. Remember the things I've told you? Show our sincerity and the two heads alone won't represent the Comte family's loyalty. Besides, even if we did have the heads, they would likely be rotten and smelly by now. It was not a good idea to offer 2 rotten heads to His Majesty. Everything had deviated from its original track since His Majesty left the King's City. What we did next depends on the specific situation. In the end, it would be the negotiator's ability that determined the negotiation result. Your Majesty, an emissary delegate from the northern region is waiting outside the castle, and they want to see you, Guard Sean walked into the office and reported. The leader claimed to be Cole Comte, the second son of Calvin Comte, the present Duke of the northern region. Mr. Bareff has already verified their voucher document and emblem. They weren't forged. The northern region? Startled, Roland put down the design drawings. Wasn't that Timothy's territory? Have they stated their intentions? Yes, Sir Cole said that the Duke is willing to pledge his loyalty to you, the guard answered with excitement. Voluntarily pledge his loyalty, Roland frowned at this news. It was a nuisance, for he did not need a federal lord's loyalty. It offered no help in the development of the country and would have an impact on the present centralized system. Roland actually wished they would stay in their domain with a sense of chance, waiting for him to eliminate them all. Only when the old forces were completely annihilated could the new centralization of authority be built up smoothly. However, he could not just refuse to see them. They were emissary delegates asking for cooperation. If he ignored them intentionally, the other nobles hearing the news would stop expecting a fluke and gang up to fight against him. Though it was not a problem in the military aspect, he still worried that it might influence the citizens of the eastern region and northern region. Roland already viewed them as his treasure, and of course, he wanted to keep more population. After a thought, he nodded slowly. Bring them to the living room, and let Bareff stay with them. Yes, Sean answered excitedly. Looking at the guard's expression, Roland pondered what the guard might think was that in this way the whole kingdom would soon be ruled by him. Unfortunately, it was not as simple as it looked. At the same time, he made a decision. No matter what they said, he would stick to his principle and take back the feudal nobles' rights. This point must be conveyed to all the nobles clearly to show his determination for the implementation of new policies and the reform. If rebel nobles dared to lay their hands on the citizens, he would ensure they paid a heavy price for it. There were only 2 people in the emissary delegation, now seated on one end of the long table when Roland walked into the living room. One of them was the Duke's second son, Cole Comte, and the other, a gorgeous woman. She appeared to be an assistant to Sir Cole, but in Roland's eyes, she was more outstanding than Sir Cole himself. Of course, witches were the shiniest pearls when it came to appearance, so Roland did not pay much attention to this. After all, in this era, a female assistant might also play the role of a mistress or maid. Your Majesty, I bring my father's regards to you. Cole stood and bowed respectfully to Roland, and then he expressed his intentions. The Duke of the Northern Region has a gift for you. Chapter 556, The Bottom Line. A gift? Roland said, raising his eyebrow. What's that? The Hawes family and the list of family from the Northern Region. Your Majesty, both of the earls were not only disobeying your rules, but also attempting to collude with the other nobles to rebel. My father looked through their scheme and punished both of the families. Cole said regretfully, however, I didn't expect you to come back to the western region so early. Due to my negligence, their heads working as our evidence were destroyed on the way. Hold on, your father directly executed both of the earls? He looked at his assistant and said, yes. The Count's effort to offer his service was stronger than what Roland had expected. Taking the heads of the two earls as tokens of pledging allegiance shows that they could hardly gain further support from the nobles in the eastern region. In this case, the possibility of them joining up to resist his rule of their domain was greatly reduced. Roland thought to himself, however, I'm not sure if he's lying at this moment without Nightingale being around. Pondering for a moment, he whispered to Berev beside him, are the two families mentioned in the northern region? Both Horsehead Hawes and Double Guns Lista were reputable families of the northern region, even more influential than the 5 big families from the western region. Among them, Lista's ancestors armored up and went on an expedition for the Wimbledon family. The double guns on the Cayman were taken from the Kingdom of Greycastle's flag. Berev unhurriedly said, touching his beard, of course, these happened more than 200 years ago. However, the name of the Count family was not very famous. I remember the family only appeared about 50 years ago. It was unexpected for Timothy to choose Calvin Count to be the person in charge of the northern region. It may cause dissatisfaction with the older families. If the difference of their strengths were too much, it would be less effective, even though it's to pin down the two families. So what he said is true. Roland automatically ignored the latter section the old director mumbled to show off his vast knowledge. It's unlikely a lie, Berev whispered. However, this is a matter of the noble's glory. If it came through as a lie and you've accepted their allegiance, Northern Region will have botched it for themselves. That makes sense. Roland nodded slightly. It doesn't really matter if it's a lie, the bottom line lies within ourselves. It could easily be discussed if the surrender of land ownership could be accepted. However, even the most expensive gifts are meaningless if it's about seizing power. Thinking about it, Roland looked at Cole and smiled. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to the Duke. Defending the honor of the royal family is the responsibility of every noble. Your father has done a good job. Secondly, both of the earls have received the punishment they deserved, and the kingdom won't further look into what Duke Count has done. Is that so? Father will be very happy to hear that. Cole seemed more than relieved. He's always wanted to serve the true king and he finally has the chance now. Is it? I'm also very happy to accept the allegiance of Duke of the Northern Region. But he must agree to obey the new regulations of Grey Castle. The new regulations? Cole was slightly surprised. What are they? The regulation to retrieve the manor power of the noble. Roland was looking at Cole to measure his expression. He said word by word, there'll no longer be any noble title in the kingdom. All the domains within the Kingdom of Grey Castle will only have one lord, who is the king himself from now on. What? Your Majesty, this, Cole's expression drastically changed, he turned around and looked at his assistant again. Is he really the second son of the Duke? Although he looks a little younger, he shouldn't be worse than his female officer. His assistant at least managed to keep calm although she was shocked with her mouth slightly open. Of course, it was also possible that she couldn't understand what I said. Roland thought. No worries, nobles are still nobles. The munificent life you live won't change and you'll even have a chance to hit a new peak. Roland clapped his hands, summoning the attendant to prepare the promotional manual. Longsong Stronghold has fully implemented a new set of regulations. You can see many stories regarding the change and some real-life examples of the nobles in the manual. Although it may seem that the nobles have lost part of their privileges, in fact, it has also released the nobles from the manor to engage within the kingdom and even the dance floor of the entire continent. Cole was totally lost. But I don't know. Cole's expression was slightly disappointing to Roland. However, thinking about it, it's normal. As the second son of the Duke, he is after all just getting into his adulthood. He's probably just a messenger for this trip without the actual power of making any decision. Anyway, you can always send the message back to Duke Calvin. You can also stay in the city of Neverwinter and enjoy the unique scenery here while waiting for his answer. I think you'll love it here. Although the Duke sending his second son on behalf indeed showed sincerity, Roland was not planning to waste it, so he was temporarily detaining the son to prevent the Duke from being reckless. He thought that the meeting had come to an end, without expecting Cole to make another request. Your Majesty, may I have a tour within your domain to see how the paddle steamer and steam engine are made? It was a novel request. Roland looked at him with interest and said, Are you interested in it? Yes, I've heard about such a strange ship when I was in the King's City. I realized that they're everywhere here in the western region. I'm curious to learn how a paddle steamer moves without a sail. Cole said with one hand covering his chest. I see. Roland nodded with a smile and said, I'll get Director Barev to arrange it. Roland returned to the office after dealing with the northern envoy. He was just about to complete the drawing in his hand when he heard a rapid knock coming from outside the window. He turned around and saw two unexpected figures. Lightning was lying on the windowsill while Maggie was crouching on her head, pecking on the glass window. Roland's heart suddenly tightened. It's only been 3 days. The paddle steamer shouldn't be able to return so soon. Could it be an accident? Why did you come back first? He opened the French window and impatiently asked, What about the others? Your Majesty. We've captured a demon. However, Anna, Leaf, and Nightingale were injured, Coo. Luckily, there's nothing serious. However, it's pretty painful, Coo. Can you please allow Miss Nana to come with us? Listening to both of them scrambling to finish the story, Roland felt as if he was on a roller coaster. He sighed and said, Nothing serious? No, Coo. I'll order people to fetch Nana. He turned around and walked out of the room. Remember to finish telling everything at once next time. The next evening, 2 paddle steamers finally appeared at the west end of the Redwater River. The First Army stayed behind and evacuated the number 22 trestle, and prepared a covered carriage in order to prevent the crowd from becoming panicked at the sight of the demon. A temporary barrack was set up in the castle backyard, as a laboratory and a study of demons and sigils, under Leaf's supervision. Roland felt completely relieved when he saw Anna and Nightingale walking down the trestle. It was only 4 days since their departure, however, it felt like months to him. The time went by especially slow when he heard those 2 were injured. It's a difficult task this time. Roland grinned and opened up his arms to Anna. Anna did not say anything but ran into Roland's arms and hugged him tightly. Nightingale sighed. You said you'd be waiting for us in the castle. The pier is not safe, Your Majesty. You too, Roland said and laughed. You had a long day. Well, she uncomfortably shifted her head and said, It was actually all right. Anna let go of Roland and pulled Nightingale in as well. Followed by Wendy, then Leaf. This time all the witches took turns to give Roland a hug, including Agatha and Iffy. The figures of the crowd looked extremely long under the reflection of the maroon-colored setting sun. Chapter 557, Damage Testing. After dinner, Roland immediately rushed to the castle's backyard even though he really wanted to have some private time with Anna first. However, the red mist from the demon was limited and the experiment had to be carried out immediately. Almost all of the members of the Witch Union were present, even those who were not taking part in the test did not want to miss out on the chance to take a closer look at the enemy. The dissected mad demon was already under Breeze's control, quietly lying in the middle of the shed's floor. This was the first time Roland got to see an alien being that was different from a human. It had a huge body and was even taller than Iron Axe by a full head's height. Its frozen arms were as thick as a human's thighs, with ridges of clearly defined muscles, fully covered by blue blood vessels that showcased its great strength. The black-blue color of its rough skin was supposed to be normal, considering that the demon's blood was blue in color. Roland reached out his hand to feel its body. Clearly, the demon's body was warmer and that meant that their metabolism rate was faster. In other words, the higher their metabolism rate was, the lower their environmental adaptability would be. Since the mad demon had a respirator which was connected to its helmet, its appearance was temporarily hidden. However, judging from its entire appearance, it was obviously an advanced chordate. A mad demon at least had a human-like appearance, especially when compared to the ridiculous fearsome demon and the Lord of Hell. Of course, according to Agatha, the junior demon had lower intelligence and could not be compared to humans. When speaking of cunning and trickery, though, the senior demon was more like a human. Among the 5 demons, the super magic was melted by the sigil of God's will and one of the mad demons was dissected by Anna. 2 bottles of red mist came from the remaining 3 and they were used on the way. Agatha rubbed her forehead, looking a little tired and her voice was much softer than usual. The mist will only last until tomorrow evening. So, the experiment should be carried out before tomorrow afternoon, if we want to make the sigil. I'll still need half a day to melt down the base of the sigil and I may fail a few times during the process. The red mist is fatal to witches. How did you manage to change the gas tank? We turned to the common people for help. She pointed at the sclerotin container that was set to the side and said, I brought back some of the empty storage tanks in case we needed them in the future. Roland nodded and turned around to look at Breeze and said, Can you control the magic power it used? If it can do it, Breeze seriously answered, I don't need to specifically manipulate its every move, but rather just give it an order and force it to follow the order. This command is beyond the limits of language and thought, so even the demonic beasts would follow it. But of course, it shouldn't be too complicated. That's good. Roland then instructed Nana. Connect the limbs so I can see the power and intervals of a mad demon spear thrower. Hold on. In the castle? Lily frowned. Mystery Moon, Hummingbird, and the others immediately hid behind Wendy. However, Paper and Summer, who had not experienced the destruction of the Witch Cooperation Association, did not have much reaction. Their expressions showed curiosity instead of fear. Will there be an accident? Soft Feathers muttered. Don't worry. We're watching it, Iffy calmly said. Roland had roughly understood the process of the melting point action during the dinner. The unexpected appearance of a senior demon caused a panic among the team, leading them into danger. However, the witches finally managed to defeat the strong enemy. Iffy played an important role, especially after the Sigil of God's will became ineffective. Her determination to make time for everyone to escape had changed the others' perspective towards her, and her attitude towards non-combat witches also became softer. However, it was so subtle that even Iffy herself probably did not notice the slight transformations. Perhaps it would take a little longer for her to be accepted as one of the team. However, Roland could see the opportunity for both sides to reconcile. Nana reluctantly squatted down to start treating the demon. There was absolutely no way to complete the surgery with conventional medicine. In a situation where there was a lack of an anti-freezing agent, it would only prevent the limbs from becoming rotten, but it would not be able to prevent the cellular structure from becoming burned by the freezing. However, the poor condition of the broken limbs was clearly improving, and even the mottled burns were fading, bit by bit, under the unreasonable magic restoration. Once the limbs were completely reconnected, the originally black-colored skin was gradually turning green, which signified the blood was starting to recirculate. After half an hour, the demon quietly stood up from where it had been lying on the ground and slowly walked out of the shed. The witches followed it out one by one, and this was different from their former swarming manner of just rushing in. Now they formed a long line behind Wendy and Scroll. The mixed expressions of fear and curiosity on Mystery Moon's and the others' faces made Roland laugh uncontrollably. Leaf had already prepared the shooting range, which was a target around 200 meters away from the wooden shed. There were a steel plate and a cuirass, which were hanging down from the grapevines located at the end of the garden fence after passing through the 2 rows of olive trees which lined both sides. It was also the conventional combat distance for a revolving rifle. Start. Roland signaled, looking at the demon with the bone spear. Yes. Breeze just finished her words when the arms of the mad demon started to swell. The magic stone mounted on its arms was glowing with a faint yellow light, The demon stepped forward, with its body bent, and it threw the bone spear towards the target. There was a flash of white, followed by the crisp noise of the cuirass, ringing in the distance. His arms quickly shriveled, as if it had exhausted all its strength. Probably due to its severe injuries, the recovery time was far longer than usual. Its arms only returned to their normal state after about an hour. Of course, its throwing power was not weak. The bone spear had completely penetrated the cuirass and it was firmly pinned to the fence. Pulling the bone spear out, it could be seen that the spearhead was broken from the impact of throwing. There would be more damage if it were replaced by the iron short spear. However, looking at the dressing of the mad demon, the enemy probably had less of an understanding of metal utilization compared to humans. Even the armor of the senior demon did not look like it was made of pure metal. After thinking about it, it was probably due to the high temperature flame needed to smelt the metal, and the red mist happened not to be resistant. If the information given by Agatha was accurate, the demons must be very careful with their use of fire. If the human civilization had originated from fire, then the demons were probably born to hate their fire. The next test was the quick throw. The mad demon was forced to throw 2 bone spears within a short interval of time. However, it was roaring in pain. Although its body was controlled, the sharp pain caused by the overuse of magic stones was not removed. Its arms were paralyzed after it finished throwing. They looked shriveled and dry like bark and could not recover again. Both of the bone spears had been crushed against the 3 mm thick steel plate. Thus, the most threatening technique of the mad demon could be compared to revolving rifles using black powder bullets, which if replaced by the bolt rifle, could easily pierce through a steel plate. Chapter 558, Beauty. After reaching the conclusion, Roland felt slightly relieved. The basic combat capability of the demons did not exceed the combat efficiency of the conventional firearms, as the machine gun and cannon were enough to crush all the enemies within the distance of 500 to 1,000 meters, while the spear thrower attack was obviously unsuitable for the trench warfare. Mad Demon would not even stand a chance as long as the bullet production kept up with the pace, since it would take 3 to 5 seconds for the magic stone to charge up and take effect. It implied that at least the humans would be competitive on the front lines of the battlefield. It would be nice if you were born in Tequila. Agatha sighed while staring at the weapon in Roland's hand. The number of common people on the fertile plains is 100 times more than those in the kingdom of Grey Castle, so is the number of witches. If every one of them had a spear in their hands, the demons would have probably run back to where they came from. Roland smiled, but he did not agree with it in his heart. After all, it was a witch-dominated empire 400 years ago. He thought, if there were really a weapon that gave the common people power beyond the witches, would the seniors of the Union have lightly accepted such an existence? Witches have always been the minority. There were millions of humans yet only thousands of witches. This has been the case since the Land of Dawn until the fertile plains. Would the long-oppressed common people willingly set foot on the battlefield? Once the actual strength was reversed, the disintegration of the dominance hierarchy would inevitably lead to civil strife. The idea of fighting for the survival of the human beings was still extremely vague after the awakening of nationalism, not to mention a group of humans who had been living like slaves to have such a lofty ideal. Of course, Roland would not talk about these conclusions in the public, and Agatha was simply a researcher of the Quest Society, so it would be better not to involve her in the political matters. After the damage test, Anna amputated the demon again and put it into a steel cage. "Is that all?" Agatha asked. Roland shook his head and said, "That's all for today. The injury test shall begin tomorrow morning." "What's that?" "We're going to test the resistance ability of the various parts of the demon to shooting, as well as the effects of the chemicals, Pill of Madness and Dreamland Water," Roland answered. "Oh yeah, and get Lucia to separate the composition of red mist and see what we can get out of it." Unfortunately, the demon can't be kept alive for the long term. Otherwise, more comprehensive data could be collected by using Nana's healing power on the demon. Agatha yawned and said, "Up to you. However, I'll need 2 witch assistants to help me make the sigil, and the materials must be prepared in advance as the blood doesn't last once the demon is dead." It's better to start melting the god's stone of retaliation when the demon is still alive. She paused and said, by the way, what kind of sigil do you want to make? We can make any of them as long as we've sufficient magic stones? Of course, she nodded and said, the failure doesn't consume the stone itself but I. Oh no, nothing. Roland raised his brows and asked, what's with you? Never mind. It was simply a slip of the tongue, Agatha curled her lips and said. At most you'll only be losing some raw materials. Roland did not continue pressing since Agatha did not want to go on. Let me come back to you with an answer tomorrow morning after I study the magic stone collection. It was bound to be a sleepless night. Edith Conte was standing by the window, overlooking the city under the night sky. Businessmen always refer to candlelight as wealth. The brighter a place is in the night, the wealthier it is. She thought that within the inner city of the King's City, the scene of a brightly lit night would only exist near the taverns and theaters. However, she could never really grasp the true meaning of brightly lit night here, within the southern coast of the Redwater River. Looking from afar, the shore was as bright as if it were lit. However, it was not the orange glow of the bonfire but a soft yellow light, looking bright yet stable as if it were yarn-covered sunlight. The entire factory area would be continuously producing a variety of goods at night, goods that they called industrial products. The steam engine was one of them. The afternoon visit had left Edith feeling an indescribable shock. A shock which was beyond the shock left by the fight on the battlefield or anything else. It was even beyond comparison with the removal of land command mentioned by His Majesty. When she entered the factory, she saw some rough iron ingots that were being spun and drilled one by one. Her attention was instantly caught, especially when the dirty iron slabs that were full of grease and scrapes transformed into shiny components that had been given a sense of newborn beauty. The hard materials were processed into different shapes by the roaring machines that could work by themselves after being put together in a unique way. What a wonderful sight it was. The factory was not a wonderful place with the running sewage and metal scraps all over the floor, in addition to the noise and humid air, but Edith had stayed there for an entire afternoon. And, she could clearly remember the City Hall officer who brought the emissary delegation to visit was looking impatient and wanted to leave the noisy place early. The officer felt relieved when the group of people finally intended to leave and there was a statement she could freshly remember, what's so interesting about this machine? Only His Majesty Roland will think that there's a hidden beauty within these black blotches. Hidden beauty? Edith suddenly felt a strong resonance. That was right. It was the beauty that was brought by the pure power and that could knead and transform the metal without any restraint. There was an additional kind of beauty with the aid of a natural trend, especially after she understood the operational principle of the steam engine. The beauty was far beyond the beauty of colorful gems and exquisite luxury clothing. She could only feel that something had faintly touched her heart. How does His Majesty know these pieces of knowledge? What else does he know? Suddenly, a knocking sound outside the bedroom interrupted Edith's thoughts. Sister, I've done bathing, Cole stuck his head in and said, and the water is still warm. Do you want to take a bath as well? Get the servant to boil a new basin of water. She ordered. Do you understand the principle of the water intake here? I've sent someone to ask around. The water of the pipeline seems to flow out from the standing iron tower. Cole touched his head while walking into the room. As for how the water flows upwards from the well, they didn't really say anything about it. Oh yeah, there was something in the bathroom that you must try. It looks like a special fat but it smells really good after soaking in the water. It feels fantastic to clean the body with it. I can assure you that even the milk and rose bath is not as comfortable. Is this deliberately arranged by His Majesty? Edith could not help but ponder. The residence of the emissary delegation was located near the castle district. It was a 4-story building with a top floor that was higher than half of the castle. Not only could they enjoy the night view of the city of Neverwinter from there, but even the layout and facilities of the rooms were quite ingenious. Although it was not big, it was comfortable to live in. A reception officer from the City Hall mentioned that it was the hotel His Majesty specifically prepared for the foreign emissary, which was calling the Foreign Affairs Building. From what she could see, It was Roland Wimbledon's intention to show off with both the clear water that was pouring out from the valve once it was unscrewed and the washing material that Cole was praising about. Chapter 559, A Discussion about the System. What do you think of it? Edith sat back to the bed. The bathroom? No, the new laws. Cole was a bit hesitated. I'm going to write Father a letter tomorrow and tell him His Majesty's terms. I don't think he'll agree. Really? Edith neither approved nor disapproved. Seeing Edith did not refute him, Cole ventured more confidently. I've read the booklet distributed by His Majesty. Let's put aside the credibility issue for now and just look at the example. The top-ranking noble listed as the example is just an earl's son, who is currently equivalent to a duke without lands. To be honest, I'd definitely make the same choice if I were merely a knight. However, our father is the designated ruler of the northern region, Duke of the City of Evernight. He has far greater power and more distinctive social status than the oldest son of the Honeysuckle family. If he agrees to His Majesty's terms, it means he's consenting to hand over his domain. This isn't a promotion, but a demotion instead. Good reasoning. Edith nodded with a smile, but soon went on before her brother could feel good about himself. But you've missed one thing. What? Whether we're able to keep our current status and power is uncertain. Cole was a little stunned. You've apparently focused on the story in the latter part of the booklet, but I care more about the paragraph at the beginning. Edith picked up the advertising pamphlet from the nightstand and flipped over the cover page. If this is really His Majesty's idea, I have to say it's quite interesting. The cause of feudalism? Cole peeped over her shoulder. Have you figured out what it means? It's just a made-up word. You can call it the current system or the system of nobility. Cole looked confused. Edith shook her head in silence. It seemed quite strange to put such an awkward paragraph at the very beginning of the booklet. The writing did not really flow at first glance, and the contents were also much drier than the following examples. Nevertheless, after probing into its underlying meanings, she realized that this opening statement was the basis of Roland Wimbledon's decision to implement the new laws. It was her first time to come across such an innovative and eloquent argument. Have you ever thought of the reason we grant lands to subordinate knights and vassals? To have them remain loyal to the Comte family, Cole mumbled, and also to attract more courageous men to work for us. What if our father becomes the sole ruler of the entire northern region? Edith continued to ask. Do you mean to have all the lands go to our family? Cole shook his head after some contemplation. That won't work. If we hold all the lands, these knights will lose their properties and thus leave for somewhere else to seek employment, so will the lower nobles. The Comte family will then become the only nobles in the town. Isn't it nice? Of course not. Cole winked, failing to understand why his sister asked such a self-evident question. The northern region is way too large to handle by ourselves. It takes the guards around half a week just to march from the city of Evernight to the Palisade City in the event of an attack, not to mention the extra time we need to deliver messages. Plus, it'll be rather problematic to collect taxes and food. We can't wait for those lowlifes to voluntarily make the payment, can we? So, we constantly increase our subordinates to keep our lands is fundamentally due to the potential war requirements and our limitations of management. These two factors are also what His Majesty thinks the main cause of feudalism. Edith said while caressing the booklet. However, things have changed. No matter how we arm ourselves, it's futile to resist His Majesty's unstoppable army. Meanwhile, His Majesty firmly believes a powerful city hall will be able to manage the whole region. As a matter of course, there'll be no need to grant lands to the nobles. Well, Cole groped unsuccessfully for adequate words, failing because he did not know what to respond. Roland Wimbledon thinks such a change is inevitable. Edith pointed to the last sentence of the opening statement. A well-functioning centralized government will unavoidably replace feudal nobles, because a unified management system will make better use of resources across the whole region and maximize people's potential, and thereby largely increase the productivity of the entire kingdom. Productivity determines the dominant power of the state. Nonsense. Cole bellowed. What's productivity? Farming skills? A knight can knock 10 farmers down. Besides, where does he get so much manpower to administer the whole country and take charge of tax collection? He still, after all, needs to rely on the nobles. In that case, what will be the difference? Those lowlifes won't care about who their king is. I'm as curious as you are in this regard. Edith curled up her lips into a smile. But don't you think the person who is capable of jotting down such a plan will have full preparation for the implementation of the new laws? She paused for a moment and then said, let's call on him again tomorrow. I'll do the talking this time. That fast? Cole was surprised. Don't you usually reveal your true identity only after they inquire about it? I can't wait till then. Edith shrugged. Also, don't write to father just yet. You've heard that he's let me take the lead on this meeting. Are you going to agree to His Majesty's proposal? Cole gasped. Father will kill you. Huh? No, I mean he'll resent you. Cole soon corrected himself. After all, he sent you primarily for the purpose of keeping his title as a duke. Don't worry. I'm not that amenable. Edith raised her eyebrows. Since the king has already placed his bid, surely I have to negotiate a better price, don't you think? The following day, Roland received multiple injury test reports in succession. Demons were by no means physically stronger than witches. Although both guns and swords could fatally injure them, toxin could not due to their different physiological structure. For instance, none of the chlorine, nitric oxide, and carbon monoxide had any impacts on demons. Even they did, it resulted from the decrease in the effective ingredients in the red mist. Neither the Dreamland water nor the pill of madness worked. The Dreamland water had failed to make the demon fall asleep, and the pill of madness did not drive him crazy. As to the ingredients of the red mist, it was composed of various gases and water. Kausichi had confirmed through experiments that one part of the ingredients was flammable with an unpleasant odor. Another part was nitrogen, and the rest was unknown. However, demons appeared to depend on the feeble magic power swarming in the mist rather than these ingredients to maintain their lives, which was also why the red mist could only be preserved for a short period of time. Furthermore, the red mist would break down faster at a temperature of 300 degrees Celsius and would even burn at 800 degrees Celsius. Roland folded the reports and put them in the drawer. It seemed that other than regular firearms, the fire also lethal to demons. At least, its high temperature could effectually break down the red mist. Given that, it seemed that they could instantly reverse the situation by setting a great fire on demons' campgrounds. Chapter 560, Uncovering the Truth. Roland was debating which kind of incendiary weapon was easier to manufacture when a guard came in. Your Majesty, the ambassadors of the northern region requested to see you. It has been just one day, Roland thought, feeling a bit surprised. Are they planning to directly turn down my offer without even letting the Duke know? Bring them to the drawing room. He instructed after a momentary silence. Also, ask Carter to block all the exits to the Foreign Affairs building and stop the emissary delegation from getting out. Yes, Your Majesty. Since they had refused to agree to his policies, it left him no choice but to detain them by force. When Roland entered the drawing room, he noticed that the pair across the long table had switched their seatings. The lady, who claimed to be the assistant to Cole, was sitting in the guest of honor seat, whereas Cole was sitting next to her with a book in his hand. Your Majesty, I'm the first daughter of the Duke of the City of Evernight, Edith Comte, Cole's sister. Please accept the best regards from the Comte family. The lady rose and performed a perfect curtsy. Please forgive Cole for not introducing me during our first meeting. Calvin's daughter? Roland was intrigued by this turn of the events and after a short pause said, So you're the real leader of the emissary delegation? Yes. She placed her hand on her chest. My father has authorized me to act on his behalf with respect to all matters concerning this visit and has also given me his seal. It was fairly rare for a woman to participate in political affairs in this era, especially for a young and pretty one. Judging from Edith's confident expression, Roland could tell it was evidently not her first time to deal with heads of state. Every trait of her demeanor was impeccable. As to holding back her real identity, Roland knew it was simply a little trick to draw his attention. It was not a deliberate act of concealment or deception whatsoever, but just a disguise to mislead the other party. Most nobles would view it as a bold and playful move, which he had to admit was really effective. In other words, you can make the decision on behalf of your father? Yes, Your Majesty. More accurately, he'll follow my advice. That's such a confident answer, thought Roland, who was amused to see Cole scratching his head beside his sister. All right. So, Miss Edith, what's your purpose of this meeting? Roland had thought she would politely decline his terms or talk him out of implementing the new laws using a more playful tactic, but he did not expect to see her taking out a booklet from her backpack and spreading it on the table. That was the exact booklet he had drafted. I have a few questions to ask you. Edith came straight to the point. You said feudal nobles will be obsolete as the centralized power increases. However, how are you going to guarantee the effective management of all the local authorities in the kingdom without the assistance of nobles? Is she planning to discuss politics with me? Roland thought. From her sincere look, Roland knew she was serious. It had been a long time since he had heard such an interesting question. By people and the development of technologies, Roland answered after pondering for a long time. Do you mean free men? What's the development of technologies? Correct. A management team trained, paid and disbursed by the City Hall. Since the City Hall will provide labors and necessary equipment, administrators aren't required to have large properties or affluent manpower. Therefore, it doesn't matter whether they're nobles or not. Roland started to explain what a centralized government should look like and how ordinary people could get promoted, as well as the practical significance of technologies in domain control. It took him an hour to detail everything. How are you going to avoid dereliction of duty among the administrators of the King's City? How will the trade be distributed after the unification of the Kingdom of Grey Castle? And can you really evaluate the performance of your policies with productivity? Edith's eyes glistened with excitement as she raised more questions. It had been about noon by the time they finally closed their conversation. She heaved a sigh of relief. I see. You did have a thorough consideration before writing down the opening statement. Roland sipped the tea in satisfaction. As a person who did not major in political science, this was all he could talk about regarding politics. Thank you very much for your time, Your Majesty. I didn't expect you would answer my questions in such detail. The very basic requirement for a city hall in the new era is to publicize the policies and enable everybody to have a comprehensive understanding of its contents. Only in this way will things go well when it comes to the implementation. Edith gave an approving nod and then switched the topic. Could you provide the northern region with the equipment and workers for manufacturing steam engines? I'm afraid I can't provide the workers as the city of Neverwinter is also short of manpower. But you're welcome to send your men to study here, provided that the nobles in the northern region waive their feudal rights and agree to be under the supervision of the city hall. You'll also teach them how to manufacture paddle steamers? Of course. As long as they're willing to pay gold royals, this won't be a problem. However, it'll be hard to move the production line to the north in a short period of time without the assistance of witches. I'm very surprised by your honesty, Your Majesty. She meditated for a while. But there's one thing I don't quite understand. According to your plan, you can easily unify the whole kingdom of Grey Castle in 10 years. By then, the new policies won't face any backlash from the public and you won't really need to care about our opinions. Why are you so anxious to implement these new laws? Roland was silent. It took him quite a while to reply. Do you really want to know the reason? Edith did not expect he would speak in such a grave tone, so her manner tightened into formality as well. Yes. Then follow me. Roland rose. I'll show you one thing. Roland led Edith to the backyard in shadows of trees and took her to the wooden shed at the center of the olive woods. A demon, whose limbs had been amputated, was lying on a long table. There were all sorts of vials and flasks piling around him. Agatha was taking his blood samples to complete the final step of the preparation. "My goodness, what's this?" Edith had cried out in a low voice in disbelief, but Roland noticed she was simply shocked but not afraid. "I should have locked the shed and asked Leaf to surround the whole yard." Agatha frowned. "Don't tell me that you plan to let a common people participate in the sigil manufacture. If I were integrating the Godstone, I would have probably failed already." "Of course not. We won't be here long." Roland coughed to conceal his embarrassment and then turned to Edith. "The creature you see is of a different race. It's what you rumored as a demon. They live to the north of the impassable mountain range and are also the biggest enemies that human beings are to face. The war between the demons and mankind has nothing to do with domains or wealth, but with life and death." "Demon? A war of life and death?" Edith muttered involuntarily. "Right. It's a long story that the church has been keeping as a secret. It can be dated back to 1,000 years ago when people called it the Battle of Divine Will.